Poštovani učesnici, dobar dan i dobrodošli. Moje ime je velika mi je čast i zadovoljstvo da otvorim današnju prvu konferenciju na temu nacrta programa zaštite vazduha u Republici Srbiji sa akcionim planom. Na samom početku želela bih da zahvalim ispred Ministarstva za zaštitu životne sredine svima vama koji ste prisutni i učestvujete online na današnjem događaju, dajući značajan doprinos svojom aktivnošću, znanjem i komentarima. Zbog postojeće situacije sa COVID pandemijom i poštovanjem preventivnih mera, svim zainteresovanim učesnicima je omogućen online pristup. U skladu sa agendom današnje konferencije najpre će vas pozdraviti gospođa Aleksandra Imširagić-Đurić, pomoćnica ministra, Ministarstva zaštite životne sredine Republike Srbije, gospodin Antoine Avignon, projektni menadžer delegacije Evropske unije u Srbiji i Stevan Pešić, direktor projekta EAS-3, koji će odmah potom prezentovati projekat Evropska unija za bolju životnu sredinu. Potom reč ima Matej Gasperić, stručnjak na projektu EAS-3, tema izlaganja, predstavljanje i trenutni status nacrta programa zaštite životne sredine u Republici Srbiji sa akcionim planom. Potom je vreme za vaše predloge i preporuke, za reč se prijavljujete putem četa, a do tada molim vas da vam mikrofoni budu isključeni zbog mikrofonije i da sva vaša pitanja i sugestije budu u vezi sa prezentacijama i temom današnje konferencije. Zatim izlaganje gospođe Nadine Alemang, CITEPA EAS-3, koja je stručnjak na projektu, govorit će na temu predstavljanje tipova i rezultata modelovanja zagađujućih materija u vazduhu za Srbiju 2030. VEM, VEM-A, VEM-B. Gospođa Elsa Reals, INERIS, EAS-3, stručnjak na projektu, govorit će o rezultatima disperzionog modelovanja za Srbiju 2030. I još jedno izlaganje gospođe Alemang o pripremnim aktivnostima za tip modelovanja VEM-C. Na kraju, pre završnih reči, opet vreme za vaše predloge i preporuke. Nacrt programa zaštite vazduha u Republici Srbiji sa akcionim planom samo je jedna od aktivnosti koja se sprovodi u okviru projekta Evropska unija za bolju životnu sredinu, razvoj okvira za usklađivanje sa zakonodavstvom Evropske unije u oblasti vazduha, hemikalija i horizontalnih pitanja IPA 2014. sklopljenog između Ministarstva finansija i Expertise and Advisors u konzorcijumu sa CITEPA, INERIS i Alternative Consulting, a čiji je glavni korisnik Ministarstvo zaštite životne sredine. Sam projekat, čija je implementacija počela 8. januara 2019. godine, predstavlja jedan od vidova dobre saradnje i podrške, odnosno nastavak pružanja tehničke pomoći Evropske unije institucijama Republike Srbije u procesu usklađivanja sa pravnim tekovinama Evropske unije u oblasti životne sredine kroz poboljšani strateški i institucionalni okvir u horizontalnom sektoru, sektoru zaštite vazduha i hemikalija. Sada dajem reč gospođi Aleksandri Imširagić-Đurić, pomoćnici ministra, Ministarstva zaštite životne sredine Republike Srbije. Izvolite.
Dobar dan svima. Poštovani učesnici, velika mi je čast da vam poželim dobrodošlicu ispred Ministarstva zaštite životne sredine i da vam se zahvalim što ste svoje vreme odvojili i posvetili ga današnjoj konferenciji. Svim saradnicima na ovom projektu želim da izrazim zahvalnost na dosadašnjem trudu i posvećenosti kao i znanju i značajnom doprinosu koji nesebično dajete u okviru procesa izrade nacrta prvog programa zaštite vazduha Republike Srbije sa akcionim planom. Jedan od ključnih i očekivanih rezultata koji proizilazi iz aktivnosti koje se intenzivno sprovode u okviru projekta jeste izrada nacrta programa zaštite vazduha u Republici Srbiji sa akcionim planom. Naziv programa kao dokumenta javnih politika definisan je uz saradnju i konsultacije sa Sekretarijatom za javne politike u skladu sa Zakonom o planskom sistemu. Stoga se i zove program, a ne strategija. Potreba za ovim programom sagledana je i Zakonom o zaštiti vazduha, da je ovaj strateško-planski dokument prepoznat kao važan instrument politike i planiranja zaštite vazduha. U okviru projekta EU za bolju životnu sredinu, to jest razvoj okvira za usklađivanje sa zakonodavstvom Evropske unije u oblasti vazduha, hemikalija i horizontalnih pitanja IPA 2014, definisane su i aktivnosti koje se odnose na oblast zaštite vazduha, koje pored izrade nacrta ovog programa obuhvata izradu 5 nacrta specifičnih planova implementacije evropskih direktiva za oblast kvaliteta vazduha. U cilju efikasnog sprovođenja ovih zadataka formirane su i radne grupe i za njihovo praćenje i ocenu napretka u okviru projekta, dakle, odgovoran je i naš direktor projekta Stevan Pečić i njegov tim. Za izradu ovog dokumenta su aktivno učešće uzeli predstavnici državnih institucija, stručnih ustanova, ključni eksperti na projektu S3 koje ćete imati priliku da upoznate tokom ovih narednih prezentacija koje ćete čuti, zatim CITEPA i NERIS, Expertise Advisors, Alternative Consulting. Sam postupak izrade nacrta programa je jedan dugotrajan i veoma složen proces u kome imamo kao ministarstvo, a i kao sam predstavnik, odnosno sam projekat koji vrši realizaciju, veoma ozbiljan i multidisciplinaran pristup. Zašto? Zato što je to jako značajan dokument, dakle radimo na zapravo prvom strateškom planskom dokumentu za zaštitu vazduha i za poboljšanje kvaliteta vazduha. Ovaj proces obuhvata i utvrđivanje alternativnih opcija sa postojećim i dodatnim merama za smanjenje emisije zagađujućih materija u vazduh, a u daljim fazama izrade uključuje analizu potrebnih finansijskih troškova za njegovo postizanje. Takođe, predviđena je i analiza efekata opcija, poređenja opcija i izbor optimalnih rešenja za program zajedno sa akcionim planom. Planirano je da se kroz program urade konkretne mere i implementiraju kao i aktivnosti radi praćenja, kontrole, sprečavanja i smanjenja zagađenja vazduha, kao i štetnih posledica po zdravlje ljudi i životnu sredinu. Nacrt programa zajedno sa akcionim planom pružit će i osnovu za dalji razvoj i usvajanje podzakonskih akata i naravno nastavak prenošenja evropskog zakonodavstva u oblasti zaštite vazduha u Republici Srbiji. Cilj ove prve konferencije posvećene izradi nacrta programa zaštite vazduha u Republici Srbiji sa akcionim planom je i da se aktivno uključite od samog početka njegove izrade. Napominjemo da nam je od izuzetnog značaja da proces izrade ovog programa bude transparentan i jednako dostupan za sve zainteresovane učesnike, organe i organizacije i javnost od samog početka njegove izrade, to jest od ovog prvog nultog koraka, dakle, koji danas predstavljamo. Danas je stoga svima omogućen online pristup, baš zato što pandemija još uvek traje, a ono što je nama od posebnog značaja je da svi učesnici koji su se prijavili na današnju konferenciju daju svoj aktivan doprinos i želi bi da čujemo njihove sugestije, komentare, možda predloge, možda neka dobra stručna mišljenja, pa i po neku kritiku ako je to neophodno, jer dakle na tim kritikama možemo nešto i da naučimo svi zajedno. Učesnici današnje prve konferencije učesnicima će zapravo biti predstavljen trenutni početni status izrade nacrta programa zaštite vazduha u Republici Srbiji sa akcionim planom, kao i preliminarni nalazi i projekcije, odnosno tipovi, rezultati modelovanja zagađujućih materija u vazduhu sa Srbiju do 2030 i preko, znači do 35. O tome će vam više reći ključni eksperti koji su angažovani na ovom projektu. Zamolila bi sve prijavljene učesnike da nakon prezentacija koje budete čuli, znači u određenim momentima koji su u agendi naglašeni za vaše učešće, da uzmete zaista reč i da slobodno komunicirate na teme koje ste imali prilike da čujete. Takođe možete konkretno postaviti pitanja direktno ekspertima, samo vas molim da budete koncizni, jer trebali bi da damo priliku svakom ko je zainteresovan da može da se uključi. Na kraju koristim priliku da vam saopštim da će svi ovi dokumenti koji će danas biti predstavljeni, dakle rezimei i sve prezentacije ključnih eksperata biti postavljene na sajt Ministarstva zaštite životne sredine od ponedeljka 19. aprila, kao i na sajtu projekta. Takođe, tu ćete moći naći e-mail adresu preko koje ćete imati priliku da komunicirate sa nama u narednih 15 dana, dakle od ponedeljka 19. aprila, budite slobodni da nam pišete i da nastavite i dalje saradnju sa nama. Stoga smo danas i tu da vas pozovemo da budete naši partneri, saradnici i aktivni akteri u pisanju, dakle, jednog ovako važnog strateškog planskog dokumenta za Republiku Srbiju. S poštovanjem prema vama i vašem vremenu koje ste odvojili za današnji skup, još jednom se zahvaljujem na učešću i dajem reč gospodinu Antoanu Avignonu, predstavniku delegacije Evropske unije u Srbiji, a nakon njega će vam se obratiti i gospodin Stevan Pečić, direktor projekta.
Dobar dan svima. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mrs. Mseragic, for organizing this together with the team of the project. It's a difficult time to organize events, but I see that it's an excellent setting here today, and we are there for responding, of course, all the questions after the presentation of the first time we present this draft air protection program. As we know, there are more than 7 million people dying every year of air pollution across the world, and that number speaks for itself. It's dramatic.
Taj broj je dramatičan i sve za sebe sam govori, tako da treba da...
Today we are having the air protection program in details presented to us, and we will see exactly what is the situation and what can be done and for Serbia. For us, the EU air quality is of the utmost importance, as it is for Serbian citizens. We regularly see in the statistics that European citizens in member states put air quality at the forefront of their concerns, and it's very obvious. I don't know any father or mother or brother or sister who wants to see their family members breathing air pollution or drinking bad water. We saw recently in Serbia excellent developments. We saw the adoption by the parliament of the climate law, and that is excellent news. It is evident that it brings in Serbia some interesting developments, especially when it comes to emission reduction. We take also good note that the Ministry of Environment Protection this year launched, and I think it's a premiere, 3 calls for proposal to the municipalities. This is great news. We wish to help the ministry in doing such calls even more, even wider, in a more coordinated way. For the first time, the ministry has put, I think, around 3.4 million euro for this cause, and that's excellent. Our recommendation is that we work closer together with all the international partners present in Serbia. And to remind you that the EU is the largest donor in Serbia when it comes to environmental protection. We invested more than 400 million euros in the last 12 years. Together with Serbia, who invested more than 200 million euros for environment at large. And I know that some people ask where this money is gone. I'm happy to show them where this money is being invested, because these are concrete investments with tangible results. Today, we are going to see, as I said at the beginning, for the first time, the draft air protection program and action plan. We will have discussion about this with the wide public. I would like to thank the ministry for its transparency, for its dedication to open the dialogue. This is the only way when it comes to such important topic as air quality, because it concerns us individually and collectively. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. We're very happy to have you today for our first conference related to the air protection program of the Republic of Serbia. This event is the result of hard work over the last 2 years. And I would like today to make, first of all, a general presentation of the project, to show basically where this event is part of and the different activities that are carried within the project called EU for Better Environment. First of all, brief agenda of the event. I think you all received it and it was presented briefly, but just so that you have it on the screen. So we're currently having a quick opening and welcome. I'm presenting the overall presentation of the project. Then we will move to the presentation and current status of the draft program of air protection of the Republic of Serbia with its action plan. Matej Gasperic will be presenting that. We will then open the discussion with suggestions and recommendations from participants, which we really welcome. Second presentation from the team will be the presentation of the types and modeling results of air pollutants for Serbia in 2030, where we will be presenting results of WEM, meaning the with existing measures scenario, WAM-A, that is with additional measures scenario A, and WAM-B, which is the second scenario. Further to that, from our colleague Elsa Real from Ineris, dispersion modeling results for Serbia in 2030 will be presented, again for WEM, WAM-A and WAM-B. And then Nadine Allemand from CITEPA will follow with the preparatory activities for the let's say, fourth scenario, which is the WAM-C. And we will be presenting some methodological approach. And it is very important for the project and for the ministry to have an active participation from all sides during this event. And in any case, after that, based on the documents that will be shared, we really welcome suggestions and recommendations from participants, which is an important phase of the project. And we will then move on with closing remarks and conclusions. So, project objective, purpose and implementation period, just a quick wrap up. So the project started in January 2019. The duration is 33 months. We will finish in October 2021. Overall objective, increased alignment with the EU environmental acquis through improved strategic and institutional framework. The purpose is to achieve an enhanced strategic policy, legal and institutional environment framework for selected priority directives in the environmental acquis, horizontal, air and chemical sectors. What is the project about? The project is about supporting implementation of the national environmental approximation strategy and to the upcoming EU negotiation process in 3 different sectors of Chapter 27, which is the chapter covering environmental and climate change. Those 3 sectors, once more, are ambient air quality, chemicals, and so-called horizontal sector with especially a directive called INSPIRE. And what we're doing, we're providing technical assistance to the Ministry of Environmental Protection and to other beneficiaries and stakeholders with the preparation of strategic planning and programming documents needed for the EU approximation and negotiation process. Briefly, the consortium, I think it's been introduced, expertise and advisors, alternative consulting, CITEPA and INERIS are all partners implementing this EU-funded project in Serbia. The results to be achieved. First results, approximation status to be assessed. So the assessment of the approximation status related to the 3 sectors covered by the project, that is again air, chemical and horizontal acquis, are done for 8 directives. The 8 directives are listed here. A so-called AAQ directive, ambient air quality directive, NEC, which is National Emission Ceiling Directive, sulfur in fuels, petrol and diesel fuels quality, and so-called VOC1 and VOC2. All those 5 directives are, let's say, part of the air quality acquis. Further to that, not directives, but regulations, REACH and BPR, part of the chemicals acquis. And the last directive covered is the INSPIRE directive. Approximation status assessed, what does it mean concretely? It means basically assessing the gaps that have been found and that can be seen currently in the legal system. So that's transposition status assessment, covering screening of the legal framework, review and updating of table of concordances, and compliance check. Further to that, the team performed the administrative and institutional assessments, that is review and updating of questionnaires, overview analysis of the existing Serbian administrative system and institutional organization, assessing the tasks laid down by the EU directives and regulations, assessing the administrative and institutional capacity, and describing tasks and duties of the identified organizational units. Further to this administrative and institutional assessments, the team has performed the implementation and enforcement status, meaning that all, let's say, gaps are identified for the 8 directives covered by the project. And this is all wrapped up in an approximation status report, which will be followed by 3 events, which we are happy to inform should take place probably in a month's time, second part of May. So we will be welcoming you at those 3 events, which basically will present current gaps in the current system versus the 8 directives. Second result to be achieved by the project is implementation plans prepared. That's definitely the follow-up of the previous task, which identified gaps. And with the implementation plans, the idea is to explain how to resolve the gaps and to prepare implementation plans in the frame of the EU accession process. So this results is to strengthen the capacity and the capabilities of the ministry in air and chemicals management and of the Republic Geodetic Authority for the INSPIRE directive for planning of implementation of EU requirements for the selected directives and regulations. Within this frame, basically we develop planning documents through a transparent and inclusive process, of which today's event is part of. The outputs are listed here. Program of the air protection, which is the document prepared and discussed today. The program of air protection of the Republic of Serbia with its action plan. The 8 directives and regulations specific implementation plans. Further to that, events. One of them is the one we are having today. And further events are planned, as I said, for the DSIPs. Results to be achieved, the third, let's say, main component, third main result to be achieved within our project is the multi-annual investment financing plan adjusted. This multi-annual investment financing plan has been prepared by the ministry in previous phases, also with the support of the EU, and we are furthering this support, and basically with the result to increase the capacities of the ministry in charge for environmental protection, as well as other institutions, in the cost assessment, investment, and financing planning. The outputs is the revised so-called MIFP, that is multi-annual investment and financing plan. And also we will be organizing an event to promote the work done in this frame. Having a little focus now on, let's say, the topic we're covering today, which is the program of air protection of the Republic of Serbia with its action plan. Just to have an overall explanation, my colleague Matej will further present the overall work in more details and the overall approach in more details. But just some basic facts and some basic methodological aspects. The overall articulation of the activities on this program, on the preparation of this program, is around what we call 3 pillars. Pillar 1 is based on national emission ceilings, what we call emissions control. The activities address the sources of air pollution and deal with all issues related to Serbia's future air pollutants emissions control strategies until 2030 and beyond. The second pillar is focused on what we call AQ activities, that is ambient air pollution activities. And this addresses all relevant issues related to the ambient air quality in zones and agglomerations in Serbia. And as you can see, it is very much connected to the AAQ directive, while the work on Pillar 1 is obviously connected to the NEC, that is National Emission Ceilings Directive. The third pillar of our work is related to the actual drafting of the program of air protection and its action plan. And the activities are related to our aim to build on the results from Pillar 1 and 2, and basically wrapping them up and having a good action plan. Again, an important methodological aspect. My colleagues will later focus on those aspects, but we would like to remind in the beginning of this conference the scenario definition. So we have modeled the impact of different scenarios. So just a little, let's say, vocabulary and wording. When we say WEM, and I believe the Serbian translation will also be WEM, it means with existing measures. WAM means with additional measures. And we have currently a scenario A and a scenario B. Scenario A relates to EU policies and measures scenario. That is, we have a full implementation of all relevant EU directives and regulations, which are not yet fully transposed and implemented, while in the WEM scenario, we have modeled the impact on air and impact on emissions with existing measures, meaning with the measures actually adopted. The WAM scenario B will further scenario A, that is on top of currently adopted measures and new measures that are related to EU policies and measures. We have added what we call enhanced control EU scenario, that is introducing national, financial, and fiscal policies and measures in key emission source categories, such as scraping and promotion schemes for passenger cars, for instance, household wood and coal appliances. So those are all additional measures that we have modeled in the scenario C. And what is very important is that further to this modeling and the results that will be presented today, we would like and we will carry what we can be called a fourth scenario, scenario C, WAM scenario C, which is something we can call a full control scenario, to be defined based on projections from WAM scenarios A and B. So basically, all stakeholders, participants in this event and persons who want to react are free to do so. And basically, our idea is based on comments that we will receive to finalize the definition of a scenario C and to be able to model it and show the results in probably a couple of months' time. The workflow process, which I hope can be seen on the screen, it seems it's maybe not the case. It's kind of a complex workflow process, but which basically has the purpose to explain, let's say, the complexity of the matter and the work that's been done together with the ministry and the work group, which we would like to thank, because it's very important to have a very smooth process in terms of communication and endorsing all the different outputs that, let's say, have led us to where we are today. So again, this workflow hopefully will be more visible once on the website, and will show basically that from the definition of the WEM, which implied assessing policies and their adoption in Serbia and the practice, also the implementation of the current policies. We have moved to defining WAM scenarios to model their effects on in terms of emission, and further work on specialization, meaning being able to visualize this, let's say, geographically, and further performing the dispersion modeling, that is the impact on air quality of the different scenarios. So in green are basically all the steps that we've, let's say, validated so far. There are even more steps before this workflow, but this provides a general overview of the whole process. And again, sorry, it seems it's not fully visible on the screen, but I'm sure it will be better on the websites. So, though probably I'm repeating myself a little bit, but the aim of my presentation was to give the bigger picture of the project, of the assistance we're providing, and then to focus on today's program. So as a conclusion, I would just again like to highlight the main parts of the content of the event, which you understand are basically reflecting the work on those scenarios, and with the aim of viewing the effect that this would have on emissions and on air quality. So the presentations are actually structured around the conclusion and the findings of this work. First of all, presentation and current status of the draft program of air protection of the Republic of Serbia with action plan. And this will be presented by Matej Gasperic, who is our senior expert in charge of that task. Further to that, we will have the presentation of the types and modeling results for air pollutants for Serbia in 2030. Again, with existing measures, WEM, then WAM-A, WAM-B. This will be presented by Nadine Allemand, who is from our CITEPA consortium partner. Then Elsa Real from Ineris will show us the dispersion modeling results for Serbia 2030. This has been done using a model which is called Chimère. And the last presentation, last but definitely not least, as you understand, is the preparatory activities for the WAM-C scenario, where again we insist we welcome any comments and suggestions, so that we further model this scenario and hopefully bring good air quality in this part of the world, which is the aim of this component of the project. Questions and assistance, you have my contact details, and everything is on EUZTB website. Thank you very much.
Hvala najlepše. Reč ima gospodin Matej Gasperic, stručnjak na projektu EAS-3 na temu predstavljanje i trenutni status nacrta programa zaštite životne sredine u Republici Srbiji sa akcionim planom. Izvolite.
Thank you very much. Good morning. The point. Stefan pointed. Okay. Very good. So good morning also from my side. Today I will share with you a current development on the preparation of the program of air protection of the Republic of Serbia with the action plan. As you can see, it's the first conference. Project director already mentioned, it's not the last one. We'll have a follow-up conferences following this one. I will today, address the methodological approach for the preparation of the program. Explain how we approach towards the preparation of the program. Then, we will go through the activities that were conducted so far and all the technical background documentation that is necessary for that kind of the document. Then we will go through the proposed content and structure of the program. I think it's important that the stakeholders are aware of and also provide the feedback and inputs for the future, how the future program will look like. And of course, I will share with you some next steps and expected timing, what is ahead of us. Before we move forward, maybe let's just go through some acronyms and that you will hear not in my presentation but also in the follow-up presentations today. So CLR-TAP, it's convention for the it's an acronym for the Convention on Long-Range Boundary and Pollution. As you can see, it was open for signature back in 1979. So obviously, the fight for air quality is now, it's what, 4 decades, I guess, since 1979. This convention is having many protocols. One of them, it's also Gothenburg Protocol, which is a multi-effect protocol, and it is transposed into the EU legislation through a National Emission Ceiling Directive. It's so-called NEC Directive, where we have obligations for the member states to reduce emissions of air pollutants. Then we will M2, whenever you will hear about M2, we are referring to the scenarios that was prepared, mitigation scenarios prepared under the draft climate strategy for the Republic of Serbia. NERP, National Emission Reduction Programs. I think you are all aware that the big producers, the big polluters here in Serbia are already bound to reduce its emissions. Namely, all the power sector is included in this reduction program, and it's been, I think, adopted last year by the government, and the work is already ongoing on the measures to reduce emissions for the big polluters. PM10, PM2.5, we are talking about particle matters with 10 microns or less in diameter, and for the PM2.5, 2.5 micrometers in diameter. NMVOC, the volatile organic compounds, and then it goes for the non-methane. DSIP, it's directive specific implementation plan. It is pretty much a kind of a roadmap for the country for the transposition and implementation of certain legal framework. I think for the starting point, we need to explain, which pollutants will be covered by the program. When it comes to the pollutants, we will cover all the pollutants that are in the NEC directive plus the PM10, which is pretty much regulated through the ambient air quality directive. So the first pollutant, sulfur dioxide. The main sector for the sulfur dioxide is, of course, the power sector, the energy sector. Nitrous oxides, the main sector here, polluting sector, is the transport sector. PM2.5, PM10, it's all about households burning lignite or burning biomass. But also to some extent also industry, and also wherever you have a combustion of the solid, and to some extent also liquid fuels. Non-methane volatile organic compounds, It's all about the fugitive emissions, application, painting applications when it comes to, VOCs in some products and so forth and so back. Ammonia, 90% of the ammonia is coming from agriculture sector. So this is just a little bit of the overview why we're covering those pollutants. Of course, because they have negative effects on the health. When it comes to SO2, as you may already know, even the short exposure to high concentration of the SO2 can harm a human respiratory system. It can make your breathing difficult, especially people with asthma, and in particular children are also sensitive to the effects of SO2. Then NOx emissions and the VOCs all together, they form through the photochemical reaction, they form ground level ozone. Ground level ozone is having, of course, can trigger you symptoms of asthma, can reduce your lung function, cause all kinds of lung diseases. NO2 itself, if you are exposed to, if you are kind of exposed to high levels of the high concentrations of the NO2, it can also, trigger symptoms of bronchitis and asthmatic, an increase in asthmatic symptoms for children. NO3, ammonia, it's all about eutrophication, nitrogen intake, excessive nitrogen intake into the soil. You have issues with the water quality, and of course also with which then affects, the ecosystem when it comes to the groundwater, or of course, you have issues then also when the nitrogen and penetrates through the groundwater, you might also have the effects on your drinking water. So, and then, the most important two pollutants, so it's the PM. PM, it's important to stress that, of course, the smaller the particle is, the harmful, the more harm can those particles do to your body. As you can see, PM10 on the right side here, PM10 pretty much affects your upper airway, so upper respiratory tract. And of course, the smaller the particle is, the deeper they penetrate into your body. And of course, the more harm they can do to your cardiovascular system. So when it comes to PM10, it can cause all kind of respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases, coronary heart diseases, all kind of dementia and female reproductivity disorders and unhealthy birth outcomes. So this is very serious issue that the humankind is pretty much facing with. It's not only Serbia that is having issues with the PM. There is also more developed countries also having issues with the PM, especially with the PM 2.5. So from this was pretty much the short introductions when it comes to the pollutants covered. When it comes to the starting point for all the preparation for all the programs are pretty much activity data. What we need to achieve here, because activity data are then multiplied with the emission factors, and then emission factors are then reduced through the abatement measures, to get the final emissions. It is important to stress that you need to have a harmonized approach when it comes to climate change and air quality issues. Therefore, of course, our starting point was the M2 scenario for the draft climate strategy. Why? Because we would like to stress that the M2 scenario is already taking on board the full implementation of the EU climate and energy acquis, which means that all the measures, all about measures regarding the green energy, energy efficiency, new building codes, if you like, CO2 in cars, eco-labeling, all the opening of the market, third energy package. So all these measures are already included in these pathways that you are seeing in here. This is pretty much the starting point. This was pretty much the starting point also for our then mitigation scenarios. When it comes to the modeling tools used, I think, when it comes to doing the projections of air pollutants, we use slightly updated and upgraded RAINS model. RAINS model was prepared years ago, decades ago, I would say, by IASA. It's International Institute for Applied System Analysis. This model is widely used around the EU for assessing different mitigation options when it comes to the air pollutants. When it comes to dispersion modeling, we use a Chimère model, well-known French model, which is a dispersion model. It's a multi-scale chemistry transport model for atmospheric composition analysis and also for forecast. In principle, this model translates your RAINS outcomes, so your emissions, into the air quality, so into the concentration of pollutants of the air quality. At the top of that, of course, we used alpha risk pool model to translate the air pollution into the effects, into the health effects. Health effects are usually expressed in decreased life expectancy and in years of life lost. So these are pretty much the three models. You will also hear from the follow-up presentations details on the modeling part. So how all these pieces of puzzle are put together. This is presented in this slide. So on the left side, as I said, we are using outcome from the climate strategy, which was also prepared by the Jimmy 3 Primes package, which is also used by European Commission. This package is also used now, as far as I know, also by the energy community for the policy purposes. When it comes to the pillar 1, which is on your left side, yes, pillar 1, the main input data for the pillar 1 are data from SEPA, so from the inventory. So the step 1 was we do all the assessment. We have done all the assessment of the inventories. I would like to note that the base year for the projections was 2015. Why 2015? Because as Stefan already said, project started in 2019. At that time, the available inventories was 2017. But since the models work for 5 years, periodicity is 5 years, so that was a logical decision to take 2015. Moreover, 2015 was, in-depth assess the quality of data, and the reliability data was also assessed through the climate project, because it is important to have a very solid ground for the preparation of the program. Then, of course, the next step was, if you want to create the WEM scenario, you need to assess your current policies and measures, because the WEM scenario is all about your existing baseline scenario, so which policies and measures you already have in place. You have some horizontal policies and measures, you have some vertically and sectoral policies and measures. Then, when you create the existing scenario, then of course you are moving forward. We created so-called WEM A and WEM B scenario. There are mitigation scenarios. After those mitigation scenarios, you will hear more on these scenarios from Nadine Almon Sitepa in the next presentation. Then, of course, the next step is the preparation of all the data to be used as an input in a pillar 3. This is prepared through the specialization of the emissions. So in principle, your total emissions in Serbia, you need to put them on the map of Serbia. You need to do the specialization. In principle, you have 3 types of emission sources: point sources, line sources, and area sources. And then, of course, this is then used for our pillar 2. Pillar 2 In short, it's all about air quality. Again, the main input data for the air quality are the results of the monitoring network. That is, we have a state network and the local network. We again assess all the input data, do all the quality checks. The next step was the calibration of the model on the year 2015, because you need to have a consistency among the pillars. So also here, our starting point was 2015, and then of course when we prepare the WEM-A scenario, the WEM-A scenario went into the Chimere, model, and of course the results. While we have a feedback here, is because you realize that the results, of course, are indicated that the air quality is not at the level that would be fully in line with the EU requirements. It means that you need to build an additional scenario. It was a WEM-B scenario, and then even with this scenario, you will have some hotspots. You will see this through the presentation of Elsa Real. It is important that it is an interactive process. And one of these discussions, we will also have it today, it's on the WEM-C scenario, is how to address the remaining hotspots in 2030 for Serbia. The results and the outputs of these two pillars are pretty much then feeding into the pillar 3. Pillar 3 is all about the preparation of the program and preparation of the action plan. What is slightly difficult here to see on the maybe on the Zoom, it's possible to see. On the right side, it's like it's a line that goes from the pillar 3 into the DSIPs on your right side. What is important to say that when this program will be adopted by the government, it will become a kind of a position for Serbia, how much Serbia can reduce its emissions, and this is then important for the directive specific implementation plan for the next directive. So how much can Serbia contribute to the emission reductions? The same goes for the DSIP on the ambient air quality. All this modeling will give you an answer by when Serbia can have air quality which is fully in compliance with the EU legal framework, and of course which will be the policies and measures, who needs to do what by when. The activities that we have under each pillar, as you can see, there are multiple activities that you need to do in order to have appropriate deliverables for the pillar 2. As I said, it goes from assessment of the current policies through the assessment of the inventories, preparation of the baseline scenario. Of course, cost and benefits are also one of the elements, and the spatial planning. For the pillar 2, as I said, it's all about the air quality. The assessment of the current state air quality also shows that, for example, in 2019, more than, I think, 44 or 45% of the overall Serbia population were exposed to poor air quality. 92% of the people living in Serbia in cities and in agglomeration are also exposed to poor air quality. And if you look at the time series, you will realize that the situation is getting worse and worse, and therefore the preparation of that program is really more than necessary. As I said, on the pillar 3, we will have this discussion on the WEM-C scenario when it comes to additional policies and measures, especially when it comes to the local communities, because there will be some hotspots that we will need to address. And as you can see, we will have additional 2 events. Sorry, I missed to move forward on the slides. We will have additional 2 events on the preparation of this program. And of course, as a project, we will do the final public event on the document that, draft document to be said, that we will prepare. When it comes to proposed structure of the program is fully aligned with the requirements of the law on planning system of the Republic of Serbia. As you see, I mean, it's pretty much, structure, expected structure, starting with the introduction, then background policy framework. We will show which horizontal and, sectoral policies and measures are already in place currently in Serbia. We will present the current situation regarding the air quality in Serbia in terms of total emissions, how the total emissions are developing, and we will share with you the time series of the what is happening with air quality. This will be presented per categories of air quality, category 1, category 2, and category 3 of the air quality here in Serbia. Baseline scenario will give you a presentation how the air quality would look like without the implementation, without a preparation, adoption, and then implementation of this program. Vision, it's a vision how we would wish to see Serbia in a certain time period. It will be 2030 or 2035. Air quality mitigation scenarios all scenarios will be presented here, together with the costs and health costs, and then health and other environmental impacts of those scenarios. Then we will set a general objective and specific objectives. And then, after that, we will do the multi-criteria analysis, and, we will gather all the information from the beneficiary, from the stakeholders, to pretty much come to a scenario, which will be so-called the selected scenarios out of these mitigation scenarios. And then for this selected scenario, we will present all the necessary policies and measures and environmental impact. So it will be completely clear picture who needs to do what by when, what will be the cost, who will bear the cost, what activities measures will be disaggregated on the activities level, so each measure will have its own time frame and activities that are a part of that measure. Framework for monitoring and reporting is one of the crucial elements, I have to say, because through this framework, Serbia will be able to follow the implementation of the policies and measures included in the program. And then, of course, it comes the action plan. The action plan is also important. It will be prepared for the period of 5 years. It is important because in the action plan, we will have all the relevant data needed for the budgetary planning, so for the Ministry of Finance, and of course, for the planning of the implementation of the measures, and of course, what are the amount of resources needed from the budget for the implementation of the measures. In the appendixes, we will provide you all additional background information relevant, being more disaggregated results of the modeling, being also, additional activities that ministry is doing in terms also of the ozone-related pollutants. And, also we will present you the consultation process and also other relevant information that also, maybe we will receive from you today, some inputs, what additional information you would like to see in these appendixes. And the last slide is about the next steps and timing. So the next steps will be, we need to define together with the stakeholders and local community, we need to define the most ambitious scenario. It is the WMC scenario. So we are, even through today's event, we were seeking the inputs from the stakeholders. Next step will be, we will do the assessment, all the cost and benefits and health impacts for all the scenarios, right? On that, we will do multi-criteria analysis. This activity will be also open to the public. We are thinking about using Google Forums to pretty much get as many inputs as possible on this activity when we will select the appropriate mitigation scenario for Serbia. After that, we will have another public event It is scheduled for May, June 2021. When we will have all the inputs from the stakeholders, after that, we will be ready to make a draft program with action plan. And then, of course, when we will have this draft program with the action plan, when we will have a green light from the beneficiary to go live with this draft program, then we will have another public event. Most likely it will be in July 2021, but of course depends on the situation, general situation, which I sincerely believe that we will have some normal life in by July 2021. So that will be pretty much from my side. So I hope that you have a little bit now of like, a little bit of a bigger picture, how, which activities, what we are doing, what is next, which inputs do we need from your side. Thank you very much. So, yeah, please.
Hvala najlepše. Sada je, kao što smo već na početku rekli, vreme za vaše predloge, preporuke, komentare, pitanja. Imamo 80 učesnika na Zoom platformi, dakle mogu i oni da postavljaju pitanja, možete i vi koji ste sa nama u sali zajedno. Eto, govornici su otvoreni za pitanja i raspoloženi za sve odgovore. Izvolite. Imali pitanja? Da li se neko javlja za reč? Da li možda neko od učesnika želi da još nešto doda, neku sugestiju za učesnike? Ima li pitanja? Evo, Nataša Đerek, zašto se radi program, a ne strategija? Eto, mislim da je gospođa Aleksandra to u uvodnom izlaganju rekla, ali eto, ovo je pitanje za kogod želi. Izvolite.
I think it's great. In principle, I think it was, already said, Serbia is now, it's having very important piece of legislation, which is law on policy planning. And the law on policy planning is rather clear, and through that law, of course, which all the other legal, frameworks have 2 years' time to align, the text in their own specific sectoral laws. So in principle, what we are doing, we are upfront pretty much preparing the program. But when you look at the requirements at that law for the program and for the strategy, you will realize that in principle, when it comes to the substance and the elements that I just showed, there is pretty much zero difference. So it could be, when it comes to the content, there is no difference between the program and the strategy, but in order to be in line with the law on policy planning, the name of this legal piece will be program. I think this is, I hope this is rather clear now. What do we have? Yeah. So when it comes to the time frame of the program or of the strategy, you need to understand that the law allows for the flexibility. And we use 2030 time period for the program for a very simple reason. 2030 is, I would say, a milestone for pretty much all the current EU legal requirements. When it comes to NEC directive, it's about 2030. So how much emission reductions member states can achieve by 2030 and beyond. In order to be consistent, it's logical that, we will have a program by, of course, 2030. This is the main reason why we took 2030 as a period for the program. Furthermore, you also need to understand that the policies and measures in the program, this is not something that, you can do it overnight. There will be a lot of activities. There will be most likely also some changes to your legal framework, some, changes to your, other policies that, you are implementing. There is also the huge element of the behavioral change that is needed, especially when we talk about household use of biomass, use of coal and, other pollutants, other fuels that are contributing to the air pollution here in Serbia. Pitanje za koje, da li možemo dobiti više informacija o procesu monitoringa i evaluacije? Koji alati su predviđeni za procenu stepena napretka implementacije? So, when it comes to the monitoring itself, you need to understand that the monitoring itself, it will have for 2030 for each policy and measure target value. So it means target value is something which you can monitor. So something that is, or you're coming from your statistical office, or you're coming for any other, let's say, activities that you are doing. For example, if you are doing some subsidies, right? Then I don't know, you're doing some subsidies to, improve or to change your equipment back home, to use biomass. When you're doing these subsidies, of course, you will monitor how many subsidies you're doing. And then, of course, this will then enter into the monitoring framework for the implementation of the strategy, because each policy and measure that we will prepare, it will have a very clear indicator, what is the level of implementation of that specific policy and how you measure this implementation. So it will not be a blah, blah, blah something, but it will be a number. As long as we have a number, we have a source of information from where this number, supposed to come. In principle, then the ministry will, on a yearly basis, follow this indicator and see whether the ministry and the activities are, pretty much on the pathway to achieve the target value in 2030 or not. I'm assuming if it's on the pathway, it's okay. If it's not, I'm expected then the ministry will go back, do some corrective actions, do some, additional efforts that this particular measure will be implemented. Yes. When it comes to the economic assessment, of course, the life expectancies and the life loss can be translated into money. This is into the revenues loss and stuff like that. When it comes to a general economic assessment, I think that some information are already available in the climate change strategy, and they're order of magnitude higher than the effects when we talk about the implementation of this program. Does SEPA have a form? Okay. Does SEPA have enforcement capabilities necessary to enforce operators refusing to share emission compliant national inventories data? Okay. So when it comes to SEPA, I think that they have this registry of the big polluters, and it's my understanding that they are not only they are enforcing, especially for the big polluters, to report all the data to them. I think they have a legal background and legal framework around, so they allow us to do the enforcement. When it comes to the inventories, you need to understand that national inventories are usually prepared through the already available data that is coming usually from sources such as statistical office, and then statistical office has then its own legal background to enforce that the people really report reliable data to the statistical office. Let's see more. Thank you very much. Through the project. Yeah, when it comes to efforts in this program to tackle climate change, I mean, there is one element which is, which is a little bit, I would say you have conflicting ways how to look at some issues. For example, biomass. Biomass from the perspective of climate change, this is the way to go, right? But of course, if this biomass is not used properly, if this biomass is used in how you call it, smederevac, and if it's used in like old appliances, then of course, this kind of this is creating some significant problems when it comes to air quality. When it comes to which program is affecting each other, it's more like that the climate strategy is affecting the air quality, because you need to understand that every energy efficiency that you are doing, every energy efficiency is having positive effects on the air quality. Any increase in production of renewables, electricity from being wind, photovoltaics, whatever, if you are, by doing that, reducing the emissions from fossil fuels, of course, you are contributing to the air quality. So it's more like that the mitigation scenarios in the air quality affects also the air quality program, and that's why we make sure that these two programs are aligned. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to cost effectiveness, it has to be. I'm sorry, I didn't mention. When it comes to cost effectiveness, of course, also the EU legal framework is talking about that at some point, the countries need to look at the cost effectiveness of the measures, because at some point the cost for the measures outweigh the benefits, right? So the list of the measures that we have in our models are all policies and measures that are recognized by the other countries and by the European Commission as a cost-effective measure. So we are not introducing the measures that were already recognized maybe by some other countries, because the issue of the air quality is not just limited to Serbia. It's very horizontal as all other environmental issues. So I would like to confirm all the policies and measures that we will propose are those that are already recognized as a cost-effective one. Okay. So far, thank you very much.
Hvala vama i na pitanjima, hvala gospodinu Gasperiću na odgovorima. Nastavljamo dalje sa programom. Gospođa Nadine Alemand, CITEPA, 3 stručnjak na projektu. Tema predstavljanje tipova i rezultata modelovanja zagađujućih materija u vazduhu za Srbiju 2030. VEM, VEM-A, VEM-B. Izvolite.
Samo moment, imamo još jedno pitanje ako je moguće da se odgovori. Will possible formal curricular adjustment to be considered? Aleksandar Macura.
Okay. Just a second, just for us to see the chat. University schools. I would like to know that in addition to, let's call it a hardcore policies and measures, right? There will be also some segment which will address so-called the soft policies and measures, and of course awareness raising and the curricula and that kind of stuff will also find a place in that kind of soft segment of the measure. It's very systematic. It's not only about, you know, the air quality. It's pretty much about the environmental protection in general. You know, it's not only air quality. We have the issues with water, ground, climate change, sustainable development as such, and so forth and so back. Thanks for the answers. Okay, thank you very much.
Hvala najlepše. Reč ima gospođa Nadina Aleman.
Good morning, everybody. Do you hear me correctly? There is a kind of echo. Perhaps it is just on my computer. Is it okay for you? So,
Da, čujemo vas. Da, sve u redu.
Sorry, I need to put the translation. Sorry. Yes, I am on English, no problem. Can I share my presentation, or because now I see just a presentation in Serbian? Do I have to share my presentation, or do you share the...
Morate da šerujete. Da, morate da šerujete, izvinite.
Yes, thank you.
Hvala vama.
Can you see it?
Da, vidimo, da.
Thank you very much. Sorry for this adjustment. So good morning, everybody. It will be a pleasure for me to, sorry, I need to go to the second slide. It will be a pleasure for me to present you what could be the evolution of emissions in 2030, as this was explained by Matej in the preceding presentation. We are estimating what could be the emission in 2030 and 2035 according to different scenarios. You have the acronym of the different scenario. I will explain later in my presentation what are those scenarios. So during my presentation, I will explain our baseline. Our baseline is 2015, and we have emission inventory for this year, which give us the main sources of emissions. And I will explain. This is very important to have this emission inventory and understand what are the main sources. After, I will present the different scenarios developed and their characteristics. What are the expected evolution of emissions, and what are our conclusion and the next steps to be carried out. So what are the emissions in 2015 and the main sources of emissions? You have on this slide.
Na ovom slajdu vidite
the slide, you have the emission in 2015 for SO2, for NOx, for VOC, for PM10 and PM2.5, and for ammonia. This emission inventory is coming from the work of the Agency for Protection of Environment, the SEPA, and we made an assessment of the emission inventory carried out, and for this work we made some adjustment, but this is not really important. I think the most important is to see the graph on the right side part of the slide, and you can see the different activities contributing to the emissions. So you have the different pollutants, SO2, NOx, VOC. It is okay?
Yes, okay.
PM10, PM2.5, and ammonia. And here, I do not know if you can see my mouse, and you have the different activities. So in this kind of brown, you have the public power emissions, that is to say, emissions coming from production of energy for the production of electricity, but we have also here district heating plants. And in blue, you have emissions coming from industry, both processes and combustion plants. In green, you have emissions coming from other combustion. In other combustion, what do we have? We have emission coming from activities such as residential activities and tertiary activities, mainly combustion, if you look at the PM10 and PM2.5. And in this blue, light blue, you have, before you have fugitive emissions. Fugitive emission mainly for VOC emissions. And fugitive emission for VOC are coming from the distribution of fuels, of petrol, of in fugitive emission in refineries, etc. After you have solvents in blue, the use of solvent mainly for VOC, and after you have a series of, you have road traffic, because road traffic is an important source for NOx emissions, but you can see that road traffic is less important for PM10 and PM2.5. This graph is at the level of Serbia. The distribution of activities emission can be different if you look at a city size. And in brown, another brown here, you have the different activities coming from agriculture. You have in this kind of blue, you have agriculture, but livestock, and in brown, it is other activities like spreading of fertilizers, both manure and other type of fertilizers. And you can see what is important, and this is the first step to define a plan to reduce the emission, is to understand where are the emissions and what are the main sources, because it is important to focus on the largest sources before to focus on sources which are not contributing a lot to the emissions. So it is what we did. We have this emission inventory and this information to assess what could be made to reduce the emissions. And for this work, we did an in-depth assessment of the Serbian framework to reduce emissions and improve air quality. The policy framework, we did an in-depth assessment of that. So we as Matej explained, we developed several scenarios. So I will explain you what are those scenarios. In fact, we developed we will have 4 scenarios. One scenario with existing measure. In this scenario, you have policies and measures already adopted and implemented before 2019. Sometimes this reference to this date is not so simple, because you can have already some regulation, but which are not correctly applied, or for which some delay were asked to be implemented fully in Serbia. So we did this distinction between existing measures and what could be additional measures. Additional measures in a
Scenarija sa postojećim merama i scenarija sa
dotation of relevant EU directives and regulation in order to transpose them and implement them. In the 1B, it is an additional we have additional measures because for some activities, such as the road transport and also domestic appliances, in domestic appliances burning wood or coal, you have regulation coming from the EU, and especially for road traffic, you have the famous Euro norms. Currently, the new vehicles put on the market need to be Euro 6, but in the Republic of Serbia, you have imports of second-hand vehicles, which can be very old, sometimes has Euro 3 or Euro 4 vehicles are still can be imported. So those vehicles are quite old, and the regulation is Euro 3 or Euro 4. That is to say, very far from the best efficiency of current vehicles currently put on the market if they respect the Euro 6 norm. And you have also for domestic heating the problem, which is encoded everywhere in Europe. That is to say that the efficiency of appliances is not very good, so there is a need to improve this efficiency, and we have EU regulation to name eco-design regulation, and new appliances put on the market, if they are compliant with this regulation, EU regulation, present higher efficiency and lower emissions. So there is a need also to introduce this type of appliances and to increase the rate of replacement of the oldest one. And as Matej said, with this scenario B, perhaps we cannot reach good air quality everywhere in Serbia. So we have an additional scenario which is not yet fully developed. I will present you what we foresee for this scenario, but we will probably extend some financial incentive, some perhaps probably restriction of additional bans. I will present this scenario in my last presentation of this morning. So Matej Kasperich also explained that our scenario is based on the scenario M2 of the climate strategy. That is to say, in this scenario, as it was explained, we consider reduction of emission of greenhouse gases. And to reduce greenhouse gases, you implement measures to increase energy efficiency. You have development of different type of fuels. All this is considered in our emission projections, and we are in good compliance with this scenario. So now, what are the measures taken for the different activities? I am sorry, this table is perhaps a little bit too long to describe, to be described, but I would like to say that just for the main activities, what are the main EU regulation or regulation taken into account for large combustion plant? What is a large combustion plant? Is a combustion plant with a thermal thermal power larger than 50 megawatt. Here we have a number of those plants in Serbia. So in our WEM scenario, we just took the Serbian regulation, but in the WEM A and WEM B, we introduced the Industrial Emission Directive, Chapter 2, that is to say, the introduction of best available techniques in the industrial plants. And for medium combustion plants, that is to say, plants between 1 and 50 megawatt, we introduced the Medium Combustion Plant Directive. And for that directive, we have implementation date different according to the size of the plants. For the, this NERP, for the whole large combustion plant in the electricity production, so this was taken into account both in the WEM scenario and in the WAM scenario. For small domestic appliances, as I explained, there is no regulation for the WEM scenario, but in the WAM A and WAM B scenario, you have the application of the EU regulations. And in the WAM A, we are with a natural rate of replacement of appliances from 2025, but in the WAM B, we have additional measures, financial measures to increase the rate of replacement of the appliances. We have also regulation to limit the sulfur content of some fuels, and this is taken in the WAM A and WAM B scenario. For industrial installations, that is to say, production of cement, of glass, we have the application of the European Directive on industrial emission. It is also the application of the best available techniques. For other industrial plants not in the scope of this directive, we apply the Serbian regulation, and you have the details on the slide. And for the industrial use of solvent, you have also regulation. The regulation was prepared in Serbia, but not yet correctly applied. So it is why I can say no regulation considered, but in the WAM A and B, we apply this regulation, and we assume it will be implemented. After a huge, as you saw in one of the slides, road traffic is a huge emitter of NO2 emission, and we developed for new vehicles put on the market in Serbia, they are compliant with the latest EU directive and the latest EU norm. So in 2021, it is the Euro norm 6D, but you have imports of second-hand vehicles, and for us, there is it could be interesting to introduce some phase out of those import of old vehicles. So we propose several phase out, that is to say the minimum Euro norm considered for these second-hand vehicles could be Euro 4 from 2023, Euro 5 from 2025, and your minimum requirement Euro 6 from 2030. And we have a different proposal for the different scenario. But we have also for the oldest diesel vehicles a program in the 1B to try to remove the oldest vehicles from the fleet in Serbia. A program to early scrap a number of vehicles. For the distribution of petrol, here again, we have the application of the Serbian regulation, which is similar to one EU directive. And we assume that all the petrol distribution will be compliant with EU directive by the first in 2030. We have also regulation on non-road mobile machinery. Non-road mobile machinery is machinery used for civil works and for agriculture, as example. And we have also the use of gasoil with a low sulfur content for those vehicles. And another activity is agriculture for the emission of ammonia. In fact, emission of ammonia is coming from livestock and mainly from the spreading of fertilizers, both organic and synthetic fertilizers. So we apply different measures which are coming from the best practice developed by several organizations, and at least we have in the scope of the Convention on the air pollution. Matej explained you this convention. We have guidance presenting the best practice to reduce ammonia emissions. So our basis is this guidance. So we propose different measures to reduce the emission of ammonia coming from the different source of emissions. And we have also in Serbia field burning of agricultural waste. This is for not allowed activity, but still occurring. So we propose in the 1B a progressive phase out of this field burning. So what are the consequences of this implementation of limit values and regulations? You can see on this graph that the efficiency is good. You have here the emission in 2030 compared to 2015. And the first bar in blue is the WAM scenario. In light blue, it is the WAM-A scenario, and in green, the WAM-B. So you can see that for SO2, the emission, in fact, you have a huge reduction of emission already with the WAM scenario for NOx and for SO2, because all emissions from large combustion plant and old combustion plant due to the NERP are reduced. And this is very efficient. But for PM10 and for VOC, you can see that you need the 1B scenario to observe significant reduction of emissions. That is to say, for PM2.5, we obtain minus 50% of emission in 2030. And for ammonia, we could obtain minus almost 20%. So this is interesting. As it was explained, our emission inventory is also specialized across Serbia, and you have here the for 2030 the differences in emission compared the WAM-A and the WAM. It is on the left side of the slide, and the comparison between WAM-B and WAM-A. So more, if the color is a dark color, the reduction is stronger. And all those data are used for the modeling. And here you have the details per pollutants. Here it is SO2, so the WAM scenario, the WAM-A scenario, and the WAM-B, and you have 4 bars. For one is not visible because it is 0%, but This is 2025, 2030, and 2035. I will focus on 2030. And for SO2, you can see that the largest reduction of SO2 is done already by the WEM scenario, as I explained. After, you have additional reduction coming from industry or the combustion plants, but it is less. And here you have the details per activity. So you can see 2015, 2020, 25, 2030, and 2035. And this type of graph has been done for all the pollutants. So it is always the same principle. So you can see that for the WEM for SO2, the largest source was production of electricity, and we can reduce the emission coming from these large plants. For NOx, you can see that we can obtain huge reduction of emissions, but the WEM was able to reduce emission, but with the WEM-B, you can obtain minus 60% in 2030. It is interesting. And here you have the details on the share of the emission in 2000, always the same principle, but if you can look at those bars in 2030 for the WEM, 2030 for the WEM-A scenario, and 2030 for the WEM-B scenario. If we look at this, we can see that we still have road traffic as main source of NOx emission, but you have again public power emission remaining, and you have industry and other sources. For PM10, the reduction, for PM10, you need additional measures to effectively reduce the emissions. So you have, you can obtain with the 1B scenario, you can obtain minus 45 reduction. And you have here the details on the main sources of emission. If I take 2030 according to the 1B scenario, you can see that the main source remain the domestic other stationary combustion, that is to say mainly domestic heating in small appliances using wood or coal. It is the major source. After you have also this activity in agriculture, it is field burning of agricultural residue, but also other sources of PM in agriculture, and industry, and the production of electricity. We can look at PM 2.5. It is the same principle, but at least in 2030, you can obtain minus 51 of the emissions. And for PM 2.5, the share of emissions is again, it is similar as for PM 2.5, 10, but you can see that for PM 2.5, the domestic heating is the largest source of emission. And here the field burning is reduced because, as I explained, we have a measure to phase out this field burning in 2035, but we have still something remaining in 2030. And the reduction of emission in industry and public power are well reduced. For VOC, we need additional measures to reduce the emissions effectively. So in 2030 1B, we obtain a reduction of 25%. And here the share of the emissions is completely different from the other activities. In 2030, you have still industry emitting VOC. You have VOC coming from domestic heating. You have VOC coming from fugitive emissions, solvents, road traffic, and activities in agriculture. But you can see that we have a reduction in each of these segments, except for this segment industry where the emissions are increasing a little bit. And for ammonia, we could obtain, by introducing best practices to reduce ammonia emission, we could obtain minus 19% in 2030. And you have the details here. Ammonia is coming from agriculture. The other sources are quite minor compared to agriculture. So, in some words, what we can keep in mind, existing measures are, if effectively applied, can reduce the emissions effectively for SO2 and NOx. We have already a huge reduction, as I explained, for SO2 and NOx. But if we want to go further, for PM10 and VOC and ammonia, also for NOx, we need additional measures. So we introduce all the EU directive, and we implement this EU directive, and we also developed measures to reduce emission from road traffic, to avoid the imports of old second-hand vehicles, and improve the efficiency of domestic appliances, and increase the speed of replacement of these appliances. And for ammonia, we need the application of the best practice for managing the nitrogen in agriculture. And the next step are the development of the 1C scenario. We will see after, and Elsa Real will present what is the impact of the different scenario on air quality and our cost-benefit analysis. We will develop in the next weeks. So it is my hand. I would like to thank all the team of CITEPA who prepared all those calculations and made the estimations. So thank you very much. I am at your disposal for questions.
Hvala najlepše vama. Sada reč ima gospođa Elsa Real, Ineris, EAS3, stručnjak na projektu, na temu rezultati disperzionog modelovanja za Srbiju 2030. Izvolite.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, everything is okay.
Okay, I try to start. Okay. Okay, so I guess you can see my presentation. If it's not the case, please tell me. So I'm really happy to be here with you this morning. So what I will present you is the air pollution dispersion modeling results. So the results in terms of concentration simulated by our model in Serbia. So I will show you the results we have done so far. Yeah. So I will start my presentation with the methodology we have been using to simulate the concentration. Then I will show you the results we obtained, so the concentration we simulate over Serbia for the reference year 2015. Then we will move to the concentration we obtained for the prospective scenario, so for the year 2030. And then I will conclude and give you the next steps. We start with the methodology. So in order to simulate concentration, is there an echo? Well, tell me if it's not good. So in order to simulate concentration from emission, you need a model. So we are using the CHIMER model, which is a regional chemistry transport model developed by CNRS and INERIS. So it's a 3D model, which means that you cover your whole domain by 3D grids in longitude, latitude, and altitude. And in each mesh of the grid, the model will simulate chemical and physical transformation. So CHIMER simulates 80 gaseous spaces, more than 300 chemical reactions. And there is also an aerosol module in CHIMER. You simulate the different transformation related to aerosol. Before continuing, I wanted to do a brief aside on aerosol, but Matej already gave you a lot of information on its introduction. But anyway, I will talk a lot about particles on the presentation, so maybe it's good to remember different things. The first one is that aerosol can be directly emitted. That's what we call the primary particle. But it can also be formed in the atmosphere from gaseous precursors that will condensate. And we call this aerosol secondary particles. And the gaseous that can form aerosol are mainly NO2, SO2, NH3, and NMVOC. Matej already talked about the size of the particles, their impact on health. And so we are looking here at PM10, so particle with a radius coming from 0 to 10 microgram, and PM2.5, which are part of the PM10, with radius from 0 to 2.5.
Oui. Oui, je suis en réunion là, mais c'est pas grave.
Nadine, ton micro est pas coupé.
Dis-moi, c'est où? Non, mais je suis où?
Nadine?
Sorry. Yes.
Okay, so I can continue. So back to the model. So the CHIMER model, in order to simulate the concentration, needs different input data. So you need to know, first of all, you need to know the concentration at the boundary of your domain to know which quantity of pollutant will be imported by long-range transport into your domain. So for that, we are using concentration from the MAC model. Another thing the model needs to know are the meteorological parameters. In each mesh, you need to know the wind, because it has an impact on concentration, the quantity of rain, the temperature, and so on. For that, we are using the European Meteorological Model, IFS. And very importantly, of course, we need to know the surface emission of pollutants, the anthropogenic emission. So the quantity of pollutants that are emitted into your domain. So of course, for this project, we are using the specific inventory that was developed over Serbia by Nadine's team and specialized over Serbia by the University of Belgrade. So we need this annual and specialized emission, and they also developed a specific temporalization over Serbia. So we are using that over Serbia. And outside Serbia, when we do not have specific inventory, we are using the IMEP inventory. We also take into account biogenic emissions that are internally taken into account in our model. We use two nested domains. The first one is a European domain that you can see in red. And we use the zoom over Serbia and the European domain is using as boundary condition for this zoom over Serbia, this Serbian domain, with an horizontal resolution of 5 by 5 kilometers. So one mesh is 5 by 5 kilometers. And all results I will show you are on this zoomed domain over Serbia. So we can move to the results. So first of all, I will present you the concentration obtained for the reference year that can be compared with the measurements that have been taken over Serbia for this year. So I will show you results for the different pollutants. So we start with PM10. So you can see the concentration simulated by the model. So as Nadine said, particles are mainly emitted by domestic heating. So you can see hotspots where there is a lot of population. It can also be emitted by industry and electricity production. So you see some hotspots, and also from agriculture. And you see on the north of Serbia, where the main agriculture emissions are mainly emitted by agriculture, you can see a background concentration a bit higher, and this is due to that. So we can compare this simulation with the measurements. So for the year 2015, there were 10 measurement stations. So that's the little colored circles that appear on the map. So you can see that the model do simulate a hotspot over Belgrade, Novi Sad, and so on. It seems to underestimate the concentration, measured over Uzice and Valjevo. Another way to compare measurement and simulation is to look at the temporal evolution. So on this graph, on the x-axis, you can see the days over the year, and the concentration average over all stations are represented in black. And in red, you have the concentration also average over the 10 stations. So you can see there is a very good correlation between both. Almost all peaks that are measured in reality are seen by the model, but the model seems to underestimate a bit the PM10 concentration. We can do the same work for PM2.5. So you can see that the general feature is the same than for PM10. We can compare with measurements. So again, the dot, the cycle, colored cycle. Something important is that there were no measurement of PM2.5 over Serbia for this year, 2015. So we decided to create virtual PM2.5 observation. And for doing that, we based on PM10 measured on the year 2015. And we use the ratio PM2.5 per PM10 that were measured at the station, but for more recent period, when PM2.5 were added, the measurement of PM2.5 were added to the station. And we see that over the year, this ratio is really stable. It does not change. So we thought we can use this ratio to create the virtual observation. And if we look again in terms of temporal comparison, so again, the black is the observation, the red is the model. You can see again very good correlation. The peaks are very well seen. And for, let's say, spring, summer, and autumn, model is not underestimated. This time we have very good comparison between the two. But for winter, at the beginning of the year, you see that the model underestimates the concentration again. Now let's move to NO2. So NO2 is mainly emitted from the road sector. So you can see on the map simulated concentration, you can see the main road over Serbia. And also emitted from production of electricity. So you can see some hotspots. If we compare with measurements, you see the model well reproduced the hotspot over Beograd and on also other stations. If we look at the temporal evolution, again, very good correlation. The peaks are well seen by the model, but there is underestimation, small underestimation by the model. Then SO2. So SO2 is also mainly produced by electricity production and also in some industrial sector. You can see hotspots over the map, specifically over Bor, for example, and other locations. If we compare with measurement, we can see strong underestimation at some location and overestimation at other. Again, if we look in terms of temporal comparison, you can see good correlation, but this underestimation sometimes and overestimation. I finish with this comparison with ozone. Ozone is not a big problem over Serbia because concentration are quite low even during summer. And in this year, 2015, there is only 4 stations, and these stations are traffic stations or industrial for 3 of them. So the comparison is not appropriate for ozone in that. So just to finish about this comparison. So you see there is some difference between model and observation, and there are when you do a simulation. They are due to the model itself, especially related to the spatial resolution of 5 by 5 kilometers. So you have to understand that over a mesh of 5 kilometers by 5 kilometers, the model gives you only one concentration. So if you want to compare, for example, with an individual source, a peak of a short lifetime species close to an individual source that rapidly decrease from the source, the model will not be able to show you these strong peaks. It will show you something smoothed out over the 5 by 5 kilometers. So for this reason, the model should be compared with stations that are representative of background stations, the background concentrations. With this 5 by 5 kilometers, it may also be difficult to correctly reproduce concentration accumulation in narrow valley. If your narrow valley is smaller than 5 kilometers, surrounding by mountain, you will have accumulation of concentration. That can be the case for Zitsu, for example. The difference between model and observation can also be due to the input data. The boundary condition, for example, we may underestimate the impact of pollution coming from outside Serbia. If we underestimated emission in those countries, we may also there can be difference also due to the emissions we use, to the meteorological conditions. However, despite some underestimation, we really think that the overall correlation between model and observation is very good, and it is not the case of all simulation we've been doing, especially for first one. So therefore, we really consider that if by reasoning in a relative difference, so by looking at the percentage of difference between 2015 and 2030 scenario, the modeling results for 2030 scenario are robust. And so we are going to the point of the 2030 scenario and concentration. But before that, I wanted to do a point over something really important when you do an air quality plan, is the exceedances of the European Union regulatory air quality standards. In fact, when you do an air quality plan, what you really want to know is where are the exceedances in terms of concentration, exceedances of the limit value over your domain, where there are, and you want to know if you will be able to decrease these exceedances or even avoid them with the scenario you are going to take for your air quality plan. So if we look at the reference year 2015, here are the exceedances of the different limit value that are really observed. So for NO2, there is two exceedances, two stations that show exceedances over the, let's say, 30 stations, so it's not that much. For particle, PM10 or PM2.5, 8 of the 10 stations were in exceedances, so it's a lot. So clearly, particles are a problem in Serbia. For ozone, 1 station show exceedances, and for SO2, 5 stations show exceedances, and 3 of these stations were in Bor, located in Bor. So let's move to the scenario and to the concentration we simulate for that those scenarios. So here you can see a figure that is the same format than Nadine already showed you, but she showed you difference in emission. And here I show you difference in concentration. So it's a decrease in concentration over Serbia compared to the reference year for the different scenarios. So if we start with the WEM scenario, so with the dark blue on the figure. So you can see strong decrease in SO2 concentration, and it was the same for emissions, strong decrease. Here we have more than 80% of the concentration is decreased over Serbia. Also strong decrease in NO2, and also decrease in PM10 and PM2.5, quite strong decrease, more than 20%. Comparing with reduction in particles, you will see that here for WEM, the reduction in concentration are higher than reduction in primary particle. And this is due to the concomitant reduction of other pollutants such as NO2 and specifically SO2 that is strongly reduced. And so you strongly reduce also the formation of secondary particles. So you reduce the primary particle because you reduce primary emission, but you also reduced secondary particle through the reduction of gaseous species. For the WEM A in light blue and WEM B in green, this reduction of secondary particle formation is less important because the further reduction for WEM A and WEM B are less. And so for WEM B, you manage to reduce PM10 and PM2.5 by, let's say, 35% over Serbia. here is just an example of the reduction mapping we obtain in percentage. So we compare the WEM-B scenario with the reference. There is an error. It's WEM-B, not WEM. Okay, and then here we look at I will show now really focused the presentation on the regulatory aspect I already show you. So to see how we can reduce the exceedances of the air quality standard in 2030. So we start really with the calculation of the real exceedances for the 2015 years over the monitoring station. So here for PM, it's an example for annual PM10, the exceedances is 40 micrograms. So we start with this concentration and exceedance really observed. And then at the location of each station, we calculate the reduction estimated by our model in percentage. If we look at Uzice, for example, the reduction we obtain between reference and WEM-B is 34%. And we will apply this 34% at the station, at the measurement to simulate concentration and exceedances we will obtain in 2030 with the WEM-B scenario. Okay, and so I will show you the exceedances for the different pollutant and for the different limit value. So we start with PM10, and there is two limit value for PM10. The first one is on annual concentration that should not exceed 40 micrograms. So it's what I show you here on the graph is the annual PM10 at the measurement station. The reference always in gray and the different scenario with the different color. So as I said, we start with 8 stations in exceedance. And with the WEM scenario, we already avoided 5 exceedances at 5 stations. And we come up with 3 stations still in exceedances. And with WEM-A and WEM-B, we only got 2 stations that show exceedances over Serbia, Uzice, and Valjevo. If we look at the second limit value for PM10, it's the daily concentration that should not exceed 50 micrograms per square meter, more than 35 times a year. So what I show you for the different measurement stations is the number of days in exceedance of this 50 micrograms per square meter. And so you can see that we start with 8 stations in exceedances. WEM does not eliminate any exceedances. WEM-E almost it's the same, almost the exceedances are the same, still 8. And for WEM-B, you need to really implement all the WEM-B scenario to be able to reduce the number of stations in exceedances. And so you see that there is 4 stations still in exceedances, Valjevo, Uzice, Kragujevac. And Pančevo and Beograd, we are close to the limit value. So now let's go to the PM10, the PM2.5 constant limit value. So it's the limit value is on the annual concentration that should not exceed 25 micrograms per square meter. So we start with 8 stations in exceedances, and with WEM-B, we managed to have only two stations, in exceedances. And so again, it's Uzice and Valjevo. I also wanted to show you another limit value. It's a target value for the moment for EU, but in the following year, it probably become adopted by the EU as a limit value, and it's 20 microgram per square meter. And with this limit value, Krakievak is also estimated as in exceedances in 2030. If we move to NO2, so as I say, we start with 2 stations in exceedances. And with the WEM scenario is already enough to completely avoid exceedances for all stations over Serbia. And for SO2, we start with 5 stations in exceedances. The WEM station, with the WEM station, you avoid exceedances in 2 of them. You still have 3 exceedances over 4. And with WEM-B, you have 2 stations in exceedances, again, over bore. So I will conclude. So here is a graph that sum up the different figure I show you on exceedances. So at the back of the graph, you have the observation, the exceedance for the different pollutants for the observation in gray, and the different scenario colored. So you see in 2030, the WEM scenario, which means the full implementation of measures adopted by 2019. So this full scenario is able to avoid exceedances on NO2, ozone, and SO2, except in bore. But limit value for particles are still exceeded in most stations with the WEM scenario. So WEM-A and in a larger extent WEM-B measures are really necessary to further reduce limit value exceedances for particles. And with WEM-B, we managed to reduce exceedances by more than 50%. But there are still some hotspots for particles that remain with the WEM-B scenario. Valjevo, Uzice, Krakievak, Kraljevo, Belograd are very close to the limit value. And the model also simulates large PM spot over niche. And for SO2, of course, there is a hotspot in bore, over bore. So, sorry, the next is a good one. I'm gonna try to show you the good one, but maybe you can see it on the Serbian part. Well, anyway, I can, even if you don't see I can explain you even if you don't see the images. So just a minute, I need to find back my simulation. Okay, so we, as Nadine explained, we are going to do the same simulation that I show you, but for the WEM-C scenario that will be done during the next weeks. We are also going, as Matej said earlier, we are going to evaluate the impact in terms of the health impact of the reduction, because when you reduce your concentration, you will also reduce the health impact in terms of morbidity and in terms of mortality. So for doing that, we will use the alpha risk pool model, and we will also monetize this reduction in health impact. And by doing that, we can compare the health impact with the cost of the measures, because when you take measure, you have a cost for of this measure, and you can compare health impact monetized with the cost of the measure. So that's what we are going to do with the teams in the next weeks and months. Okay, so thanks for your attention. I'm sorry for this last slide that does not appear, and I'm happy to take questions if you have some.
Hvala vama, gospođo Real. Sada će vam se ponovo obratiti gospođa Nadine Halemand, CITEPA EAS3, stručnjaka na projektu. Tema je pripremne aktivnosti za tip modelovanja VAM-C, metodološki pristup. Izvolite.
Yes. So thank you very much. So you can see, you understood that with all our measures, we are still above the limit values, even if there are improvements, huge improvements. We have still some hotspots in some cities. So the aim of this development of the OMC scenario is to try to not observe anymore any hotspot in Serbia. That is to say, at least station not exceeding the limit values for PM10, PM2.5, SO2, because you saw that for NO2, the situation should be better. So I will not repeat what Elsa said, but just to remind this in our mind, and I will detail what could be possible additional measures to reduce the gap between with the limit values. So just this slide just to show that we have problems for PM10 and PM2.5. I would like also to say, as I said, that in the near future, we could have new limit values because the EU is assessing all its EU regulation on air quality, and also the World Health Organization should also provide other air quality limit values. So with all those evolution, we need to take action, additional actions. And but the main remaining problem is PM10 and PM2.5, and we have also a hotspot for SO2. But probably this hotspot for SO2 can be solved by local measures. I will explain you what we are proposing. So this figure, you already see this figure. But on this graph, you have the emissions of PM of the different pollutants in 2030. It is always a graph in blue, in light blue, and in green, according to the three scenarios, 1A and 1B, but we added a fourth bar in purple. It is the 1B, what we could expect for the 1B in 2035. That is to say, we can see that with time and the implementation of the measures and implementation improvement of the fleet of vehicles, the fleet of appliances for wood combustion, we reduce the emissions. But we need time to, there is a kind of inertia in the implementation of the measures. especially when you are on measures related to the vehicles, because to replace your fleet of vehicles, you need several years, and more years in Serbia than in Europe, as there are a lot of old vehicles. And for domestic appliances, the natural rate of replacement of domestic appliances is at least the lifetime of appliances is 20 years. So you need 20 years to replace all the appliances, at least. So we could, we think in this scenario, see to increase the speed of replacement of domestic appliances mainly. So I just, on this graph, you can, just for memory, you can see the evolution of PM10 and PM2.5 emissions according to the different scenario. Here it is the WEB B, it is our best scenario. The WEB B in 2020, 25, 2030, and 2035. Oh, sorry. And for PM 2.5, you have also 2020, 2025, 2030, and 2035. So what is the situation in 2030? For these two pollutants, the main source for Serbia as a whole is domestic heating in green. It is domestic heating. With the implementation of the regulation and the limit values for industrial plants and for large combustion plants, we have reduced the emission coming from those activities. So in 2030, the emissions are quite low, if I can say. You still have emission, road traffic in orange is also quite small. And you have this activity in brown, it is PM emission coming from field burning. As explained in the 1B scenario, field burning of agricultural residue is phased out in 2035, but still existing a little bit in 2030. So we have, according to us, we need to increase the speed of replacement of domestic appliances. This is, as it is the main sources, and even at the local level, this will remain a huge sources of emission. So we would like to propose to increase the rate of replacement of domestic appliances using wood. So we could have in financial incentive to increase this rate of replacement. We could have the measure for all Serbia, or just focusing on the cities with the exceedances of PM concentration. This will be perhaps, as we also associate cost to the reduction of emissions, this additional measure will be perhaps less costly than if we apply just on some cities compared to Serbia. We could have also perhaps for industry, because it is a source still existing in 2030, we could have stricter limit values, at least for industrial plants, with the application of the directive on industrial emissions. This directive can be applied with more or less stricter limit values, because plants need to be compliant with a range of value. So it is different if you have a plant compliant with the upper limit or the lower limit. So perhaps the lower limit which is possible, could be implemented. For PM, you have also PM emissions coming from fugitive emission of PM. It is in city, it can be civil works. You can have also quarries. You can have some fugitive emissions coming from different sources, which could be perhaps managed by good practice implementation. And for field burning, we could assume that field burning could be phased out in 2030 instead of 2035. So this is our proposal, mainly focusing on PM. And for SO2, as Elsa said, the main hotspot remain Bor, so we can assume stricter limit values for industrial plants in Bor. And with these measures, we could solve the problem of exceedances of the SO2 concentration. So here our presentation, our proposal for additional measures to improve the situation in terms of air quality for PM10, PM2.5, and SO2. You can see that our main measure on domestic heating is related to the introduction, because I saw some question in the chat by what is replaced domestic appliance, by what, in fact, what we are taking into account is an EU regulation named Eco-Design, and under the scope of this Eco-Design directive, you have several regulations focusing on specific equipment, and you have two regulations focusing on boilers and stoves using solid fuels. And from 2020 and 2022, according to the appliances put on the market need to be compliant with the limit values defined in the two regulations of the EU. And it is what is tested in our scenario, in fact, in R1A, in R1B, and in this additional scenario C. In fact, appliances put on the market and appliances people living in Serbia will buy in the near future will be with a label Eco-Design and will be more efficient in terms of emissions. But this is not sufficient, because even with a good appliance with best available techniques, if I can say, for domestic appliances, if it is not used correctly, the emission can remain high. You need to have dry wood, you need to use it correctly. There are also with appliances the need to adopt best practice to use the appliances. And for that, you need the public awareness campaign, etc. So it is what we will test in our 1C scenario in order to, I hope, solve the remaining hotspot. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have questions, I think we have now time for questions for all our presentations.
Narednih pola sata posvećujemo vašim sugestijama, predlozima i pitanjima. Stigao je značajan broj pitanja. Naši učesnici su na neka već odgovorili. U svakom slučaju dobit ćete odgovore na sva pitanja, ako ne do kraja konferencije, onda posle nje. Zamolila bih sada gospodina Gasperića da napravi kratak osvrt na to šta vas je do sada najviše interesovalo i možda da odgovori na još neko pitanje ako stigne. Izvolite.
Sad ću probati na moj srpski, nadam se da ćemo se razumeti. Znači, šta se generalno, ako nabrojimo samo neki sum up trenutnih pitanja koje smo dobili, jedno pitanje je bilo vezano znači za carbon black. Carbon black je zapravo nije uključen u UNFCCC, znači u United Nations Convention on Climate Change, ali se znači rješava preko kvalitete vazduha. Onda su bila pitanja tu vezana i za VEM scenarija, zbog čega recimo direktiva o sulfur content in fuels koja se zapravo odnosi na content sulfura u tekućim gorivama, zbog čega to nije već znači uneto u VEM scenario. U okviru našeg projekta, znači tek se priprema DSIP za punu transpoziciju i implementaciju te direktive, znači po nekim kriterijima nije ušla znači u VEM scenariju. Onda su bila tu pitanja vezana na sekundarne, znači na sekundarne particle matters, znači sekundarni, kako smo rekli, pogotovo PM2,5 se bukvalno formira, znači kad vi smanjite ostale emisije kao što su SO2, NOx, to smanjuje i emisije znači PM-a. Kompletna ta hemija svega toga je zapravo uključena u sam Chimere model. Znači Chimere model već uzima znači sve te elemente u obzir. Isto znači Chimere model, Elsa je pokazala znači vanjsku matriku za taj model, znači taj model isto uzime u obzir transboundary pollution, nije bilo prikazano u legendi, ali sama kalkulacija to uzme u obzir. Naravno, treba razumeti, nijedna zemlja u kontinentalnom delu bilo gde, ili ako niste u kontinentalnom delu, znači sve ove emisije recimo koje recimo neka zemlja u vašem, znači tu u okolini, recimo emisije Slovenije imaju efekat na emisije u Srbiji, srpske emisije imaju efekat dalje na emisije znači u susjednim zemljama, znači postoje u okviru EMEP-a matrika iz koje vam je razvidljivo koliko emisija neka država znači importira, a koliko ih eksportira. Znači to je cela nauka. Krajem krajeva treba da znate da, ne znam, sve emisije koje Kina napravi na svom delu, na kraju krajeva završe znači u jednom delu u Kaliforniji. Sve ono što Amerika stavi u vazduh ide u Europu, sve što iz Europe ide, znači ide dalje prema istoku i tako. Znači zbog toga je bila i ta cela konvencija zapravo stavljena u funkciju, jer problem kvaliteta vazduha nije samo nešto regionalno, izolovano i tako. Generalno je to. Ja bi ipak sad zamolio možda i, evo tu nam je IT su rekli da možete znači i da lično, znači da na chatu kažete da želite da imate reč, pa ćemo vas uključiti ako ti imate neki komentar vezan na VAM-C. Znači nas sad interesuje da dobijemo neki dodatni input od vas kao stakeholdera, znači za opcije što se tiče koje na kakav način, recimo, šta je vaše mišljenje, kako bi moglo da se hotspotovi koji su još ostali, na kakav način bi se ih, znači, adresiralo u smislu politike. Vidjeli smo koje su najjače, znači, sektori koji, znači, kontribuiraju kod tih preostalih emisija. Vidite da problem nije jednostavan, da i sa implementacijom vrstu politika i mera vi možete još uvijek da imate probleme sa air qualityjem, pogotovo u sredinama gde imate vi relativno, da kažem, problematičan teren, gde imate inverzije tekom zimskom perioda, znači sve su to neke lokalitete koje treba da budu isto tako adekvatno adresirane. Evropski pravni poredak je potpuno jasan, znači na celom teritoriju neke države treba da se obezbedi adekvatan kvalitet vazduha. Vidim da je gospodin Nebojša Ređić bi hteo da ima reč, ako možete da ga pustite.
Da li sam uključen? Halo? Da li me čujete?
Čujemo vas. Tu vas čujemo, verovatno. Da, izvolite.
Dobar dan svima. Ja imam dva pitanja. Prvo, ja se zovem Nebojša Ređić, ja sam načelnik odeljenja za nacionalni registar izvora zagađivanja, indikatore i informacioni sistem u Agenciji za zaštitu životne sredine. Ja sam pripremio pitanja dva na engleskom. Does this program, what Stefan talked, include the projection of the number of staff in the ministry, the agency, as well as all other state bodies for implementation of this program? It is very necessary data and information as a prerequisite for the active implementation. We in SEPA have only one person who works on air emission, as I know the same situation is in ministry. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Second one, I read very carefully these reports, and I want to emphasize that Nadine, Mate, and other colleagues done very significant activity related to the projection to main pollutants according to ClearTap and NETS directive. But there is one thing that was not done. There is no any person from the ministry or the agency who actively participated in developing projections from the initial phase, true scenarios and their characteristics, the way of calculating projection, nor in the phase of drawing conclusions. This activity, in the accordance with the law on air quality, is a part of agency obligation. So anyone from the ministry or other NGOs or so can say to us next time that we did not do our job, and we do not know how to do it because we did not participate in this phase of EAS project, except that we give to project activity data for calculation for inventory and PRTR register, like Mate and Nadine emphasized. So that's my questions. You know the old Chinese proverb, if you want to feed the poor man, don't give him fish, but teach him how to fish. So you need to teach us to fish. Thank you very much. Sorry for long speech.
Hvala za pitanje. Da li ćete vi odgovoriti? Da, izvolite.
Let's start with the first question about the capacities. I think, and this is already, a part, I mean, your statement on the first question is already a partial answer to your second question. I mean, when it comes to additional administrative capacity that is needed, not only at the agency, but also at the ministry, these capacity needs are addressed and will be reflected in the directive specific implementation plan. We will have a very, very clear information for which activities, what kind of, profile and how many of additional capacities you need at the ministry, right? And at the agency. In the agency, you have at least two fields where you need the capacity increase. One part is definitely when it comes to the inventories. This capacity needs and these capacity gaps has already been identified through previous IPA projects. And through this project, we will also identify additional capacities that, for example, in SEPA is needed for establishing and maintenance of the ambient air quality of the your network of the air quality that you are currently operating. I think this will be clearly reflected in the documentation. Then, of course, it's a part of the policy process when and how these additional capacities will be when this gap actually will be addressed. But surely it will be a very clear and transparent information how many people and for which activities are needed in the field environment. I will just give an example from Slovenia. You know, Slovenian ministry pretty much started at the very early stage with the 20 people. And then, you know, with each and every approximation step that you are doing, you know, you are taking additional environmental, you know, legislation on board. Each piece of legislation needs to have implementation part. And of course, without a proper capacities, it's simply impossible. So you cannot transpose, you cannot implement, you cannot supervise, you cannot, you know, enforce implementation of the measures if there is no sufficient capacity. I think this will be very clearly presented. On the second question, you know, unfortunately, the nature of the IPA project is such that, you know, it's a technical assistance of, I would say, a consortium. In our consortium, we have CITEPA, we have ENERIS, we have alternative consulting. I mean, of course, we would wish to add also SEPA to be, you know, part of our consortium, but unfortunately, the rules of the game does not allow that. So that's why, you know, we pretty much perform these activities in a setup that, you know, we perform. But as you said, I mean, we had with SEPA multiple interactions when it comes to the inventories. And we also appreciate your work on all the improvements that you have done for the inventories in the also for this project, but also during the previous project. So because without the proper inventories, of course, you know, you can forget about any serious and reliable emission reductions program. I mean, inventories are pretty much the basics. So, I mean, all the compliments for that part. Thank you. Do we have on the WMC? Nadine. Sorry, Nadine. Yes.
Could I say something? I do not know how to raise my hand. I didn't succeeded to do this. So sorry for my. I would like to say thanks and thank Nebosha. We know that the SEPA staff is probably understaffed, or just one person for doing all the work is not enough. I would like to add in the, probably we will take this in account, but for the future, when we will have to follow if the regulations and if the measures are effectively implemented, the emission inventory need to be able to produce what are the reality of the implementation of the measures. So the work on the emission inventory will become larger and larger in the near future. And the results of the emission inventory will be very useful to follow the correct implementation of the measures we have defined, which will be defined in the strategy. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other participants that would like to give a statement, maybe, or any kind of comment, commenting where we are on the right track, commenting whether the proposed actions for the WMC scenario is going the right direction. Any additional measures that they might feel that would work. Any ideas maybe that we maybe didn't pay attention to. Now you have the time, it's all the NGOs, I mean, all the, the public that they would like to say something. Okay, we have, I believe, Mr. Samad Akbar, the World Bank.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, congratulations. Really comprehensive work it seems to be, and very well presented. So really a big congratulations to you, to Antoine and the team at EUD for making this happen. And we are really interested and keen to follow this work and see what your policies and measures finally are. And that hopefully development partners like the World Bank can help take them to the next step in terms of implementation. In terms of WAM-C, my only, and this is a point that I think we are also struggling with in other countries, is with respect to eco-design or other solutions which improve the efficiency or have more efficient stoves, but continue to stay with biomass and coal. They pose a certain challenge in terms of their acceptance because of the impact on climate change. So, the struggle here is to find policies and measures for the domestic heating segment, which are win-win for climate and air quality. And that kind of leaves us with few alternatives and perhaps expensive alternatives. So I'm wondering, what thought has been given to that aspect. I know that you started with the M2 scenario, so there is an already sort of the climate activity part is baked in. But when it comes to policies and measures and these kind of investment interventions going forward, what are the options that seem realistic if you want to really look at a win-win situation for climate and air quality? So I would leave it at that to hear from you. And I really look forward to hopefully getting a recording of this event and the presentations, and perhaps following up with you later on through EUD in Belgrade. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether, as we already mentioned, I think, this link with the climate change and, all the elements that are linked of that link, obviously, as I said, the M2 scenario is already taking on board phasing out of coal from domestic sector. But of course, on the other hand, depends on which scenario you are looking. For example, M2, or if you go to a further GHG emission reduction, for example, M4 is bringing even additional biomass into the household sector. And of course, we can all agree that you can address this issue through technology, right? So you have eco-design, low emission appliances, low emission boilers. But of course, there is a human element to how those appliances are de facto used. If you use wood which is not properly dried, and if you don't use it properly, or there are multiple of elements which will be addressed, at least in our program, through these soft measures, awareness raising, capacity building, how the people are using biomass. One of the elements is that the people needs to sleep, right? So in principle, in order for them during the nighttime to have, let's say, a little bit of the warmth, they put like a very wet wood in the stove, so it kind of lasts longer. But of course, the effects on the air quality is just close to a disaster. So there is as you said, there are to some extent, our hands are tied, but in a way, I would also like to stress here that for the local communities, it is important that they fully understand the link between the local energy concepts that they are about to prepare, or some communities already prepare, and there is a multiple links. There is a link to the climate change, there is one link, but for the local communities, especially in the terrain, where you have steep valleys, and where you have during the winter time where you have inversion, I think it is very important how the local communities plan their local energy concept, because through the clever and smart planning you can avoid quite many problems with the air quality, and you have at the local level all kind of options, district heating, definitely, one of the options, switching the fuel, penetration of natural gas to the extent, of course, that is also envisaged in the M2 scenario, and so forth and so back. So there are practices also, in the Europe, that even, the most in the most problematic terrains, with a clever planning at the local level, you can address the issue of air quality. It's not going from today to tomorrow. It's a planning. It takes time. I will give you an example. In Slovenia, it takes 15 years. So I think our first infringement when it comes to air quality was pretty much the next year when we joined the EU. It was like, good morning, here we go, you need to deal with the air quality. And it was like 2018, 19, where we pretty much managed to put the air quality into the, in a kind of full compliance with the EU. Here and there, we still have some issues, but at least on a general level. So it's a process, it takes time. I think this is also a message, but of course you need to do the steps. You cannot just wait. It will be better. It will not be better. I mean, the history shows us that, you need to do something, that the things will go better. Do we have any additional? For those who don't know how to raise a hand, there is a reactions button, and then in the reactions button, you can raise a hand. It's at the bottom, yes. When it comes to the timing, I can repeat. When it comes to the timing, the idea is that we would have a draft program with action plan ready June, July 2021. There we have another question from Dragana Drobak. Yeah, yeah, I think the field burning is a significant. I could even say it's a problem. It's not even an issue. It seems to be a problem. There are multiple reasons for that problem. I think, the field burning currently, it's prohibited at least in Serbia by 2 laws. I think one law is law on agriculture land, and second law is on fire protection. So, but you can see every, October, November, pretty much that period, that none of the ban worked. That's why, for that reason, we didn't put the complete banning, because it's already banned, but complete stop, let's say, of the field burning into the WEM scenario, but it's already somewhere in the WEM-B scenario. I would like to know that the field burning, it's a complex issue, and it's linked with all kind of I would say improvement that Serbia will need to do in the agriculture sector. It's also linked to the funds and to the options that agricultures will have for the implementation of those measures, but it's also a part of the current agriculture policies, of course, which will need to change, because this field burning is having significant effect on the air quality in October and November. I mean, whoever is driving around Serbia, you know, everybody knows that this is a significant problem. Even if you're flying or if you're landing, I would say in Belgrade airport, you know, October, November, it's not sure whether, you know, what is happening, you know, it's like what is happening, you know, down there, because it's pretty much field fires everywhere. So it's an issue that we will try to address in the WMB scenario for sure. Yes. Okay, then we have the WMC plus. So it's about the limits recommended WHO. Yeah, WHO is about 10 milligrams per cubic meter. I would say let's go step by step. You know, let's go step by step and try at least, you know, at the phase one, you know, at the first version of the program, to at least come, you know, to a common agreement that, you know, at least we need to reach 25. I'm pretty sure that kind of paper, as this program is, it is not, you know, fully written in stone forever. You know, this program is then subject to revisions, updates. If you need to also understand that within the EU, there is already discussion that we go from 25 to 20. So if this will be implemented, or even below, if we go even below that, then of course you will need to have additional revisions of the program. Of course, you know, you can do all kind of interesting exercise. You can completely remove households from as a layer in the modeling. You can completely remove it, so you can make an assumption that 100%. So none of the households will give any contributions to the emissions. And then we can see, you know, what are the effects of transboundary air pollution. But then, of course, there is also a question of which are the similar policies or measures will be implemented in your surrounding countries. So it's a rather complex, I would say, exercise. But yes, I think it's important to say that 25 is not, you are not on the safe side. The WHO is arguing that 10 milligrams for cubic meters for PM 2.5, this is where you are on the safe side. Rest assured that in 20 years' time, the limit value will be 0, I mean, or 5, or whatever it is, because this is a natural evolution of how the limit values are kind of, in which directions they are going in the EU. Okay, for a huge number of vehicles, Serbia, which, yeah. So transport sector. I think, you know, you just go outside and it's obvious that, you know, there is quite some, I would say, vintage, pretty impressive, I would say, vehicles around there. Outside, you know, some 30 plus years old. The fact is that, of course, I mean, currently, you know, you can pretty much import Euro 3 vehicle and, you know, probably you will pay for it like a couple of hundreds. Emissions, irrelevant, right? So in principle, what we already introduced in the WMA scenario is a ban of the import of the vehicles that would start, I think, in 2024, something like that. Of course, I mean, you know, I don't want to now to go into the details of, you know, this ban, because in principle, banning of the movement of the goods within the EU is something where, you know, this is not what you are allowed to do. But in practice, if you put a proper taxation, you will get an equivalent effect as banning. For example, in Slovenia, of course, you know, we had pretty much the same story 20 years ago. You know, people also importing all kinds of vehicles, but that at some point you see the negative effects on the environment, the infringement that we have when it comes to the air quality, and that at some point, policymakers are saying, okay, we cannot do the ban, we will do the taxation. And of course, you know, you put the taxation at the level that, you know, there is no incentive for anybody to pretty much import into Serbia vehicles that would otherwise pretty much, you know, they have a negative value in the Western Europe. So you need to pay someone because this vehicle in principle would need to be scrapped, right? So I think we put this policy proposal in the WEM A scenario. One element that I would also like to mention is that this will affect the trajectory. It's not having significant effects in 2030, but it's having significant effects between the starting day of the measure and 2030. You have 85% of the vehicles first time registered in Serbia is second-hand. Euro 3 would now mean what? 20 years, right? So, I mean, you know, and Euro 4, it's still without the PM traps. So in principle, you need to look at, to set a go, let's say, set a green light for the inputs with the Euro 5 at a minimum. And then, of course, with appropriate taxation policies and then with the recycling of these taxations, maybe to support households, to buy new appliances. So you need to create a financial instrument that would support implementation of this program. What do we have? There is a numerous voice in the EU asking to align. The evolution Serbia can catch up to start looking the most. It's a statement. It's you. Okay, so yeah. Okay, yeah, so we address the transport sector. I see there was no questions on the power sector because I think that everybody is happy that the power sector needs to do all the strict emission SOx, NOx and everything that is already included in the National Emission Reduction Program. It is definitely the program, as you see it already in the WEM scenario, that will, in terms of tons of CO2 of the emission reductions, it will have huge effect on the reduction of the emission. Huge effect. But of course, as you've seen from Ilsa's presentation, this will not solve a problem in Valjevo, Kraljevo, Užice, and so forth and so back. It will solve some other problems, but you know, at the local level, in some areas, we need to count on the local measures and additional local measures. How huge is that effect? I think that when it comes to the SO2 with the NERP, I think you will cut emissions, what, for 90% or something like that. I think if you look at all the big steps, the big drops in the WEM scenario between 2020 and 2025, it is all about the NERP. So, I mean, huge means, you know, several tens of % of emission reductions. That would be huge. On PM 2.5, not that huge, but when it comes to SOx, NOx, and PM 10. PM 2.5, yes, for the sector, because if you have the sulfurization, indirectly, because of the technology, you will have also some additional reductions of the PM 10 and PM 2.5 as well. Any additional, anybody would like to have a statement? Okay, no? If not, then I would propose that we slightly... Yeah, okay. I think that if not, maybe we can do some concluding remarks. Let's give a final chance for anybody. Okay, no? Maybe they're typing it, so no, they're not. Okay. So, I mean, to conclude, as I would say, you know, we are happy that we had so many participants in this event. I'm pretty sure that the next event, as I said, we will have an option that we have live participants. It is my understanding from the comments and from you know, our presentations today and your reactions on that presentations that when it comes to the methodological approach, we are on the right track. I think the right track, including this consistency with the ensuring the consistency with the draft climate change strategy. It was also my understanding that when it comes to the program itself, and the time frame we will cover, the 2030. I think we provide a credible explanations why we would like to go to 2030. So we would keep it a program by 2030. I heard no suggestions, comments for additional improvement of the content of the program. Yes, sorry, raise it. Okay, we have. Okay, we have one hand, Mr. Rakic.
Yes.
Not there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We cannot see you, but we can hear you.
I can start the video because.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear?
Yeah, we can now even see you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Imam jedno pitanje, ja sam iz Instituta za javno zdravlje Srbije, imam pitanje da li je ovaj program malo preambiciozan 3 godine i 7 godina da se sve ovo uradi, znači da država izvrši sve ove stvari koje treba da uradi do 2030. Ako uzmemo da je Evropska komisija znači uputila čak za 16 država Evropske unije, znači raznorazne opomene za PM2,5, PM10, NO2 i tako dalje. Znači 2018. Evropska komisija uputila i za Sloveniju i za Francusku opomene, znači ima ona 4 puta, prvo se šalje pismo, pa onda država članica ima do 2 do 3 godine da odgovori. Ako nije zadovoljna Evropska komisija, onda se to vraća ponovo nazad, onda Evropska komisija šalje onu poslednju opomenu i onda se ide na sud i tako dalje. Znači, ako uzmemo da su pojedine države krenule mnogo pre, znači u rješavanje problema i sada 16 zemalja Evropske unije imaju ogroman problem, znači sa kvalitetom vazduha. Znači, Francuska je recimo dobila opomene za PM2 i PM10 i NO2 je dobila opomene. Slovenija je dobila za opomenu 2018. za PM10. Znači, sad je pitanje, tu su i Nemačka, Italija, Velika Britanija i tako dalje, da ne nabrajam, zemlje koje su jako puno ulagale u kvalitet vazduha. Cilj programa za kvalitet vazduha Evropske unije koji je donet bio je da do 2030. se smanji značajno emisija, znači i sve, i da se broj čak ljudi koji se mogu dovesti, znači oni koji su umrli, da se smanji za 52% za PM10 i prizemni ozon. Oni su pomerali to, čak i udruženje pulmologa evropskih je tražilo da se izjednači, znači sa svetskom zdravstvenom, da za PM2,5 bude 10 mikrograma po metru kubnom. Taj predlog je odbijen zbog toga što većina evropskih zemalja nije u stanju da stigne do zamišljene, znači to neke brojke od 10 mikrograma po metru kubnom. Da li ovaj program, ako gledamo iz svih aspekata, malo preambiciozan, bilo bi mnogo realnije za nekih 15-20 godina da se uzme. Uzmemo, na primer, samo državu Izrael, koja godišnje ulaže oko $500 milijarde za rešavanje kvaliteta vazduha. Ako gledamo rang listu svih zemalja, Izrael je 4-5 mesta dalje iznad, znači po lošijem kvalitetu vazduha, uključujući recimo Južnu Koreju, koja takođe je jedan od lidera, znači kako smanjivati aerozagađenje što se tiče tehnologije i tako dalje. Da li je po vama, znači, pitanje upućeno sve, da li ovo preambiciozan plan?
Dobro, hvala. Ja bi mislio da iz institucije koje dolazite da ćete reći da je premalo ambiciozan plan, ali dobro, razumem pitanje. Ono što sam već na početku rekao, vi ste lepo objasnili zapravo, već ste objasnili kako izgleda infringement procedure u EU-u. Još tu bi samo vam rekao da znači za prvi odgovor imate 30 dana. Znači kad dobite pilot, takozvani pilot case, trebate znači u 30 dana da se izjasnite o tome. Svakako ako je u pitanju air quality, da kažem, tu nema, da kažem, jedne države koja je specifičan problem. Tu imate hrpu država, ne znam, mislim da nije tu, recimo, i svake godine je neko na tapeti, ali generalno kad pogledate, ja ne znam da je tu bila jedna država, jedna ili dve možda postoji, koji historijski nisu dobile neki infringement vezan za air quality. To samo ukazuje koliko je kompleksna ta materija, a sa druge strane neko bi mogao i da reći da je evropski pravni poredak do neke mere disbalansiran, jer ako imate vi mnogo jake top-down zahteve, znači limit values da se smanji i sve to, a sa druge strane vi kroz politike i mere dopuštate neke derogacije za automobilsku industriju, za implementacije eurostandarda, za druge stvari, onda prije ili kasnije vama će doći do konflikta, jer vama emisije i standardi emisijski sa jedne strane ne odražavaju vaše političke volje sa druge strane, da bi imali odličan kvalitet vazduha. Nemaju sve zemlje te prilike da im je Atlantik sa jedne i sa druge strane, pa zapravo nemaju baš neki dramatičan problem što se tiče air quality-a, jer zapravo na neki način dobiju čist vazduh, a ono što ide dalje po centralnoj Europi, to kao nije više njihov problem. Tako da, što se ambicioznosti tiče, mi ćemo vidjeti. Mislim, mi smo dali tu dijapazon, znači do 2035. To je od danas nekih 15 godina i to je onda na kraju stvar, znači i multikriterijane analize i inputa koje smo dobili, koje ćemo dobiti i od ministarstva i od drugih stakeholdera, koji je taj scenario koji bi bio adekvatan za Srbiju. Ali sa jedne strane, ja sam bio uključen u vrstu nekih projekata, pa uvijek se čuje, recimo, od stakeholdera u tajming je ovo nije realno. Znate šta, ništa nije realno ako ne uzmeš program i kreneš da sve aktivnosti koje su popraniš, radiš po terminskom planu od dana 1, kad je bio neki program, strategija, koji god, da kažem, sistemski dokument usvojen, do krajnjeg datuma. Ako neko usvoji program ili strategiju reda radi, znači zbog toga što, evo, gura nas neka Europska unija, ovaj program, ova Srbija radi za sebe, prvenstveno za sebe, za svoje građane, da bi obezbedila svojim građanima bolje uslove. To što je to i uslov za EU, ok, ali generalno to je, mislim, to treba da se shvati. I klimatsku strategiju Srbija bi trebala da radi za sebe. Svaku strategiju, prvi, znači beneficiary bilo kog strateškog dokumenta uvek treba da bude Srbija. Tek onda ko drug ili bilo kako. Tako da, da li će na kraju ćemo završiti na VAM E ili na VAM B ili na VAM C ili na nekoj kombinaciji nečega, vidit ćemo u toku izrade, znači tog finalnog dokumenta. To bi, ali drago mi je da ste lepo objasnili da je, znači, situacija, da to nije lak problem. Znači, da ne može to nešto, rešite, usvojite nešto i stvari završena, daleko od toga. Da. To je to. I sad možda samo što se tiče, znači, daljih koraka, ako napravim jedan summary, da znamo šta nas čeka, znači, mi ćemo sa ovom idejom za VAM-C scenariju, ono što je i gospa Nadina Almon predstavila, iti dalje, pa ćemo da vidite koje rezultate ćemo da dobijemo. Znači, za ta VAM-C, da probamo da pojačamo tu implementaciju novih, znači, appliances za domaćinstva. A što se daljih, znači, aktivnosti tiče, kad ćemo mi tu sljedeći korak napraviti, mi ćemo onda pripremiti i kompletan assessment troškova i benefita i napraviti, znači, tu multikriterijanu analizu. U tom postupku ćemo uključiti i stakeholdere, znači svi koji ste danas se prijavili na ovu konferenciju, dobit ćete link za neki assessment, neki questionnaire, neke elemente ćemo vam slati da dobijemo neki vaš feedback. Svi ovi koji ste učestvovali u toj sličnoj aktivnosti koju smo imali za klimatsku strategiju, znate o čemu pričam. Posle toga ja se nadam da ćemo moći da napravimo sljedeći event gde ćemo, ja se toplo nadam, moći da imamo sve vas znači u sali. Posle toga napravimo draft strategiju, kad dobijemo zeleno svetlo, ta strategija će ići znači vama na sugestije i na komentare. Ja se nadam da nećete onda tada imati onda primedbe na elemente koje smo danas znači adresirali i za koje bi znači da kažem danas imali priliku da date komentare. Tako da se nadam da ćemo onda imati više debatu o kojim putem, u kojoj intenzivnosti, na koji način, koji su troškovi, koji su benefiti za Srbiju, za neke scenarije i da onda nađemo neki scenarije koje bi reflektirao sa jedne strane znači benefite za zdravlje, sa druge strane trebamo da budemo svesni da Srbija ima ograničen kapacitet za investicije i da treba i taj deo da se normalno uzme u obzir. Toliko bi bilo sa moje strane, tako da mislim ako nema još nekih dodatnih pitanja, onda bi ja završio taj skup, možda još reč, zaključio reč od gospode Aleksandre, da, molim, izvolite.
Dobar dan još jednom, evo ja sam zamolila da vam se još jednom na kraju obratim, zato što imam potrebu da vam kažem svima hvala i bravo, jer sve ovo vreme preko 80 učesnika je online pratilo ovu današnju prvu konferenciju za nacrt, zapravo početak izrade plana za zaštitu vazduha. Hvala vam na sugestijama, na komentarima, bili ste veoma konstruktivni, jasni. Ono što bi vas zamolila i dalje da od ponedeljka kada budemo objavili celokupan materijal sa današnje konferencije, rezime i prezentacije naših ključnih eksperata, da krenete da nam pišete. Na sajtu ministarstva biće postavljen mail pzv/sugestije@eas3.rs na koji možete da nam pišete u naredne 2 nedelje, znači počevši od 19. aprila. Svaki komentar je dobrodošao, zaista, znači stručni predlog, dakle razmatranje svih ovih materijala koje smo danas imali prilike da čujemo od naših eksperata. Zaista zahvaljujem se i svima njima, celom timu projekta, svim stručnjacima na projektu, agenciji CITEPA, Ineris, Expertise, Advisors, Alternative Consulting, kao i svim ostalim našim ključnim akterima, znači iz naših institucija, naše agencije za zaštitu životne sredine, mojim kolegama iz ministarstva. Veliko hvala, evo možete ih videti ovde pored mene. Zaista mi u ministarstvu imamo jedan mali tim, ali ne tako slab, zato što se u ovakvim uslovima zaista trudimo da budemo redovni na poslu, da dajemo maksimum od sebe i naravno drago mi je što ste pomenuli taj moment potrebe jačanja kapaciteta. Probat ćemo u nekom narednom periodu da uradimo možda nešto i po tom pitanju. Nadam se da ste zadovoljni današnjim prezentacijama, da smo postigli, odnosno da smo ispunili vaša očekivanja, bar deo njih. Ukoliko nismo, molim vas da nam to skrenete pažnju. Takođe, ono što hoću da naglasim isto da sve ovo što se radi sa prvim nacrtom zapravo morat će da se, dakle, u toku cele te procedure ispoštuju i neki zakonski okviri, a to je prevashodno zakon o planskom sistemu Republike Srbije i u skladu sa članom 32 upravo ćemo, znači, u ponedeljak i objaviti da smo započeli izradu nacrta prvog plana za zaštitu vazduha Republike Srbije. Naravno, svega ovoga ne bi bilo da mi nemamo jedan dobar timski rad. Želim da znate da ste svi vi sa druge strane, dakle online učesnici ove današnje konferencije, viđeni kao naši prvi saradnici i partneri u izradi ovog strateškog planskog dokumenta. Zato vas i dalje pozivam da ostanete do kraja sa nama i da zajedno uradimo jedan kvalitetan i dobar posao za Republiku Srbiju, jer kao što je Matej i pomenuo, znači prvo mislimo na, dakle, zdravlje naših građana, na bolji kvalitet vazduha u Srbiji, na bolji kvalitet vazduha u našim jedinicama lokalnih samouprava. Takođe pominjem i da je značajna saradnja sa njima, kao i to da one moraju razmišljati i razmatrati, dakle, u nekim narednim godinama i primjenu tih nekih dodatnih mera bez kojih nećemo postići najbolje rezultate. Hvala vam još jednom na učešću i na posvećenom vremenu koje ste danas dali nama.
Ovim je današnja konferencija završena. Hvala svima na učešću, na pažnji i svako dobro. Prijatno, doviđenja.